Right, good evening everybody, I'll make a start.
Good evening, Chairman.
Good evening, thank you. Welcome along everybody. Very prompt everybody this evening, thank you, much appreciated. Perfect timing, Councillor Brown. Perfect. Welcome along. So, first task for this evening's meeting, 8th November 2016, is to sign the minutes of the previous meeting from 6th of September. Take a quick look. Can we have a quick comment on page 6? It says here the business at the top of the page. The business manager responds that we investigate and send an explanatory note. You'll remember that Tony wasn't here at the last meeting. We had Simon Bowers. Can you confirm when did that got sent, that information, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Sorry, what? Sorry,
there was some information regards a query Council Pritchard had regarding E1.1. Everybody happy with that one?
Yeah, sent it out on the 12th of October.
That's right, great, thank you very much for confirming. It's, and also we've got here, turn to E3.1, no compliant data, and that was compliance data, actually, had been provided by the contractor. This year's results have just arrived and will be reported the next meeting, so Julie will be taking us through that tonight. Okay. I have no further comments other than to point out those. Does anybody have any comments, or is everybody happy that that was an accurate record of the meeting? Happy for me to sign that? Good. No dissent? I'll sign away, thank you. So, we've got quite a bit to get through tonight, thank you. So let's go straight to the agenda. So first of all, apologies for absence. Wendy, I think they have one, which is Councillor Robertson.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. So Councillor Robertson can't make it. He sent his apologies in advance. And we also have an agenda item regards Councillor Robertson, and that won't be covered this evening. We'll wait for him. We'll defer that to the next meeting. Declaration of members' interests. I wouldn't expect any. Particularly, for a start, of course, we're apolitical in this group, but of course there may be anything pertaining to the agenda. If anybody has any, please let us know now, or of course let us know beforehand. Nothing to add there, good. Straight on to item number 4, corporate strategic plan. Everybody at this meeting actually is a relatively regular attender, so you should know by now what happens at this point. So Julie will give us an update on the Q2, in actual fact, which is our latest full quarter we have data for, and provide update on that September issue we spoke about earlier as well. So Julie, over to you if you can take us through now. For those of you who remember a couple of meetings back, we decided to go for this electronically on the board to also enable other members that hadn't got the pack or members of the public to see it, so that's what we're going to do. If anybody can't see anything, let us know. And again, with these, we'll do it by exception. I think Julie, unless anybody's got any burning issues, in which we'll take it by...
I don't know if you want the lights off, it does make it really easy to read. I don't know how...
Councillor Paul, do you have a comment on it?
I've got one or two comments just quickly running through on some of the Greens, Chairman, if you would permit me.
We'll take those first, absolutely.
B1.3 on page 1. Pleased to say that the occupied floor space has now gone up to 99%, you will note. For information, we are about to serve notice on the prayer facility at the end of Eastern Way, where the St John's ambulance is, so forewarned is forearmed on that one.
What do you mean, Councillor Paul, forewarned is forearmed? Are you expecting some issue?
Well, because they are on a short-term lease with a short notice period, invariably there will be, do you have another premise for us to move into? Purely and simply because that has been the modus operandi of various groups, whether it be Scouts or anybody else. It will be, taken as it is at the time. It is a commercial let. It is in the middle of Site 5 for the development. So it's nothing that they were not expecting, but it's just making members aware that it will happen shortly.
Thank you. And do you know if they do have anywhere else to go?
They could be talking about a new build, but you didn't hear that from me, and it's for the confines of this room, and please do not minute it.
Well, we can't do that, Councillor Paul, because you are being taped anyway, recorded. But okay, we understand the comment. Thank you. Does anybody have any comments on that one? No. Thank you. Just to remind you, nothing stays in this room, of course, because it's a public meeting, and of course, by definition, it's scrutiny and improvement. There's transparency. Tony.
Chairman, just to confirm that point, this meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the council's website.
Thank you, Tony. Much appreciated. Any further comments, Councillor Paul, on that, or are you happy for Julie to progress?
No, I'm happy on that one.
Thank you, Julie. Over to you.
Right, we've only got 2 reds and 1 amber, I'm pleased to report. So unless you want me to go through every other one of the greens, I will just concentrate on those ones. I have hopefully done what you requested last time and split the screen to make it a bit easier. But our first one, I will just mention E1.1 here is now showing as white. Carbon dioxide emitted as a result of the council's property services. Because of concerns about the accuracy of the data that we've actually been receiving, which actually a lot comes from our external contractors, we have decided to take the figures out and not continue to report on this because we cannot verify the accuracy of the data. And one of the things I do as we go through performance is obviously we need to be able to verify that what we're presenting is correct. So we have now set further progress on carbon reduction as outlined. It's still happening, we're still doing things, but in terms of a measure, because of its high dependency, particularly on one of our external contractors, we are no longer going to report figures on that. So we've removed both the target and progress on that.
Julia, is it really, do they not have a contractual obligation to have their data independently verified? And therefore presented to us in a format which is reliable?
Yes. But they have a contractual obligation to provide us with a lot of information that is very, very difficult to actually to get. There are a lot of things that they do that were at quite high levels in terms of trying to enforce various remedies and solutions to get.
So what will be the consequence of them not providing this data? Will they have a penalty, for instance, a financial penalty?
No, because it's not in one of the financial penalties. In terms of not providing the data, it won't hit them financially, but it is in their own interest to actually very much reduce their mileage and their fuel costs because of their own business. So, it's completely in their interest to constantly strive to reduce CO2, to reduce mileage, to reduce costs. In terms of providing the data, I think it's fair to say in the scale of where we are with the contract and other contractual issues, it's not one at the top of the list.
And what is the impact on our commitments for carbon dioxide reduction of removing this? And what message then that sends out to we've said here below that we are really looking, we have to look at what we can control. The carbon management plan is in place and it's going ahead, and there's a number of things that we have done, and we're still looking at further double glazing, additional LED lighting, etc. So, and it's one of the things we are currently looking at the future corporate strategic plan, and it's very much a case of looking at what can we control, what would we like to happen. So over here we'd like it all to happen, but what can we actually enforce?
and the bits that we can enforce are very much things within our own control, they're our own buildings. So in terms of our own carbon management plan, still going ahead, full blown ahead.
Councillor Frenchman.
Could you not recalibrate the target to take that out? And so it's actually a target that Daventry does have control of, albeit a reduced one. And or could it not be split into two, saying this is the bit we control and we're doing this, and this is the bit that I presume it's the waste people are willfully ignoring, so it actually shows that we're doing our bit.
To stress they're not ignoring it, they have provided us with the data as required every year. The complexity of the data is such that we are not convinced of its accuracy, and that's the bit, to then bear in mind that the way it's actually set is a reduction year on year. Well, if we have doubts about the previous year, it then very much makes it difficult to question the next year.
Okay.
So let me stress, it's not that they're not providing the data, they are providing the data.
The veracity of it.
Good word.
Yeah, that's and if I'm not convinced the data is absolutely correct, should we be, saying yes, we've improved on last year, and that's the question.
Okay, I understand that.
So fundamentally then there's perhaps a problem with the historical data, and therefore the fundamental baseline is questionable.
Well, that's
in terms of the accuracy of the data.
To answer your question, it's just not that easy, because it is all worked on baselines from actually 2008. Plus there's been all sorts of difficulties with how it's now calculated, how things have changed. It's just a really complex one all the way through. And I think at this point in time, the time to revisit it is when we do our new corporate plan next year, because bear in mind we're in the we're very much towards the end of a 3-year rolling corporate plan, a corporate strategic plan. So it's this time, let's revisit that for April. And if we go for a similar measure, we'll look at what we know we can control, and certainly what we're absolutely convinced we've got accurate data on.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Thank you. Let's go around the table, Tony.
Well, I think Julie's largely covered the point I was going to make. The timing of where we are in the current corporate plan, we're coming to the end of this corporate plan. We are actively working on the new corporate plan now. Management team took a view, because of the issues that Julie's explained, it wasn't worth chasing this one. That view was put to portfolio holders who accepted that position.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wesley.
Yeah, I still think it's actually part of the corporate plan, and be it right or be it wrong, maybe we should put it up there and present it as sort of saying that we're not happy with what we're being given. But this is the same as it is, and it just seems a little bit odd that it's been reported on since 2008 without anyone going, it's a load of rubbish, to put it bluntly. It just seems a little bit strange.
Tony.
Well, I think it's fair to say that at this group, the information has been challenged on this particular indicator. It's not something we'd be comfortable with the management team for some period of time. And to the previous point, we've got to the position now where there seems to be little point in continuing with this in the review that's going for the new corporate plan.
I'll come back to you in a second, actually. I probably need to make a point here. I actually, as an interest in this disclosure, because I work for a certification company that does assurance on sustainability disclosures, including carbon verification, I would still like to say that for the next contractor, we actually seek that they have that data independently verified by a recognised company that actually has trustworthiness in this subject, and then we don't get down the road sort of 6 years later where we can't even trust any of the data. Councillor Wesley.
Yeah, can we be assured that it's not being ignored because it looked really, really bad on their rubbish figures?
Actually, exactly the opposite.
Okay.
It looked
too good.
Well, not even that. It's not been consistent. There's been quite huge changes in, for instance, their mileage, which is a key factor in calculating it. Now, considering they changed the bin round substantially, something like 2.5 years ago, you would have expected a drop at that point. And it did drop for a year, and then I think it went up again substantially. It's been inconsistent, so it's not been, had it have been really, really good all the way through or really, really bad, it would have been a different story. It has just been inconsistent, which is what's actually raised concerns about the data. So it's certainly not because it was bad. The opposite, if anything.
I think the reality is, I mean, they've got poor management control systems and monitoring control systems for the data. But I would like it to be acknowledged that I think this committee, I think it's fair to say, but it is disappointed in the approach of the organisation, particularly to producing quality data which we can trust as a customer. And I'd also like this committee to note that it's recommended that future data is independently verified to make sure we don't get into this situation again with any different parties. So if we can put that on the record, please, in the minutes, that'd be appreciated. And the other thing, actually, Julie, is how do we know? I mean, fundamentally, we've got a difficult relationship with this organisation, but how do we know other areas where they're meant to be compliant with the law are actually being compliant? I mean, take an example. We were at an event last week at Northampton with KPMG, a range of councillors, and they were talking about modern slavery, for instance. How do we know they have controls in place for aspects such as this as well? And we're actually not risking our reputation further by relying on their poor management systems.
I think what we have to remember, we have a partnership unit that is responsible for the monitoring and auditing of the contract. That partnership unit is based at and hosted by Northampton Borough Council. We have an inter-authority agreement with Northampton Borough Council that states exactly what that should do and that they are responsible for it. We have, throughout the years, we've actually increased our kind of resources so that we have more checks on what that partnership unit is doing. So between the resources that we've got, we ask those questions of the partnership unit, who are actually officially liable or officially responsible for carrying out those checks and that monitoring and those audits. So there are the various agreements in place to guarantee that, or to.
So what is the view of the partnership unit in this particular issue about the carbon management data and the robustness and reliability of the
Well, it's because of their concerns are exactly the concerns that, I get the data from them, they provide it to me. So I go back to them and say, this data just looks a little bit kind of, and they'll go back and then ask those questions. Now, they will possibly be told by the contractor, yes, that's the data. But it's very, very difficult to actually do an audit of how many miles of all your trucks actually done for within the resources that we have for what is a self-monitoring contract. At the end of the day, financially, who is that hitting the most? Well, it's actually the contractor, because they're paying the fuel bills, etc., to use that as an example. So it's, in terms of data, yes, there's a verification process. There are a number of occasions when someone from the partnership unit, and I've done it as well, has gone to different depots and actually looked at tonnage tickets, etc. The reality of, could we actually sit in the vehicle and drive around with them for weeks on end and record how many miles they're doing? No, we couldn't. So, it's a difficult one. But there are as many steps in place as possible for us to check that the data we're getting, is as robust as possible.
Councillor Brown, thank you.
Does the contractor not use fleet management systems that can electronically track the mileage?
It does. But I think it's very much a case of they also use an awful lot of hire vehicles when vehicles have gone off the road, etc., that might not have that, installed. They have an in-cab system that tells us lots of information, but they get a hire vehicle in, it won't have in-cab, it doesn't tell us anything. And it's also very much down to how they're accumulating the data and the accuracy of what they're then. You're talking about huge amounts of data that they're actually pulling together.
But I think that the point is, lots of companies can manage huge amounts of data. I think the problem, reality is, this is a relatively unprofessional organisation. It's got amateurish, it's got underdeveloped systems, and I think it's probably fair to say the sooner we're out of this relationship, the better. And in some respects, we've been round flogging this particular issue. This is merely another symptom about how poorly organised this organisation is. Councillor Pritchard, did you have a comment? No, okay. Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Mileage is not the be-all and end-all of whether they're carbon neutral, how much carbon emissions they have. purely and simply because if you're going down to fleet management systems, one, could incorporate tachograph readers, how long that vehicle is stationary with the engine running. They could go from A to B, which is 20 miles, which equals X amount of CO2 emissions, but in that 20 miles they could have been static for 4 hours with the engine running. So it is an immensely complicated task, and you would have to take not only mileage, you'd have to take into the equation all the tachograph readings on all the vehicles.
Councillor so I know from my professional experience that actually the software does exist for professional fleets to track all of that kind of data. I deal with large haulage fleets from an insurance point of view. I've sat in transport offices where that data is tracked. They can see in real time how long the vehicles are stationary for, which direction they're pointing in, and everything else. So it's a case of
the data is there, but they basically don't have
it's just tachograph readings.
I would even go as far as to say that it's not a complex process to track that data.
I don't think so. Okay, well, I don't wish to discuss this any further. I think it's been noted, well, it has been noted that we're not happy about the situation. It's disappointing. Not to have data and have data we can rely upon is pretty fundamental for how we treat our key performance indicators. We know the management team recognise that, and portfolios have agreed on this, and therefore we basically won't be looking at this data. I guess you'll remove this data line from the corporate plan, Julie, is that the intention?
Well, we will continue to report on what's happening that we can control on, so we will continue to add the comments in, but what we won't do is we only put a progress figure in annually anyway, because we only get the figures once a year. They are annual figures.
Well, I've actually sat here on many occasions over my couple of years running this committee, and I've queried why the data is so old when we receive it. Again, they don't need to wait that long to have the data, but what I would like to emphasise is that I think going forward for the new contractor that we've learnt the lessons from this, and we actually tighten up in this area, particularly where it impacts upon our own corporate plan indicators. Thank you. Let's move on to the next one.
Okay, the next one is the one below it, E2.1, the amount of waste going to landfill. Again, this is down to our contract. It is in the red. It has stayed in the red. Just to remind you that the target was set by the contractor as part of its tender, so the actual target won't change, can't be changed, won't be achieved. They're already well over target in terms of the amount of waste going to landfill. That is one they are financially penalised on, and again, it's one that's not in their interest to not improve on.
That's amazing, isn't it? Really. I mean, you'd think it wasn't from looking at the figures, but I don't know if anybody wants to make a comment, but I certainly don't feel like making further comments. Councillor French.
My quick comment is, if you look, it is the best quarter two they've achieved, looking back over the historical data, which isn't saying much, but I thought I'd say it.
Councillor French. Any further comments? No. Let's move on to the next one.
Okay, he's 3.1. I'm going to mention this one, and this is also part of our environmental service contract. You did ask me about this, and was there the data for it, and I responded to you saying yes, there is the data for it. Basically, street and environmental cleanliness, this is measured. It is a key performance indicator in the contract with EMS. They're supposed to do it in July every year. They did put the survey out in July. They didn't get sufficient results because contractually they have to get so many results. They put it out again, and I have got the results, and I did email you saying, yeah, it's not a problem, I'll provide you with them. Unfortunately, they had sent me them, and I thought they'd sent me my reviewed figures. What they've done is they've sent me the whole figures for the entire contract for Northampton and Daventry, which is no use to us because we only report on Daventry's. I have been asking for those figures for several months, and when I replied to you saying yes, I've got them, they'd sent me them through again, and when I read through them again, what they've done is sent me the same thing again. They're still for the whole contract. It's been mentioned at Partnership Board, it's been mentioned at the contract management meeting, so don't think we're not addressing it. We are asking for that breakdown of the figures, but I can't give you the breakdown for the figures going there at this time because I don't have the Daventry element separated to the whole figure.
Okay, when do you think you'll have it, Julie?
Well, I've been asking for the breakdown for quite a few months. I honestly would not like to tell you when I will get it. I don't know. Again, they are penalised on it. This is part of the penalty mechanism. Whatever they do now won't alter the fact that they've already been penalised for it.
It can't be penalised anymore for this.
No, so it's kind of, it's a difficult one.
So basically, it doesn't matter for them, they may never provide this data now because there's no incentive for them to provide it and there's no disincentive for them not to provide it. If that makes sense. In other words, it won't be penalised any further. That's it.
So I can't tell you. It's not for lack of trying. We've got a contract management meeting again tomorrow. It's on the agenda again for tomorrow. It will be asked again tomorrow. But me asking and getting on always the same thing.
It's organisations that
But it's not for lack of trying. Please mention that one.
Clearly, they're not looking to be serving us when the new contract starts. Then
I wouldn't like to comment.
I think, Chairman, they realise that there will be a parting of the ways at the end of this contract.
So it may well be expected actually that there's within some of these service areas even more deterioration of the service over the coming year potentially.
I think from a management point of view, what we can say is, as Julie's already illustrated, we continue to chase these things at board level. So we're doing what we can to see that performance is delivered.
I think as much as our committee would like to keep flogging this one, I think we realise you're in a difficult position, and we all parties know where we're going to be finishing this project. Councillor Wesley, did you have a quick comment?
Yeah, it was more a question really. Just how can I actually survey that?
They have to follow a set methodology. As long as it's a recognised methodology. And what they actually do was they actually went out to random households that's generated by a set programme. That didn't bring enough responses back, so they had to do it again. So it's actually done by an electronic survey, that there are links to the website, etc. And as I say, because their original methodology didn't produce what was needed, they had to go and do it again. But it's not a case of them just picking, who they think might say nice things about them. It is, randomly generated people. But it's also on the website, and it's also, there's awareness raised on the website, etc., that you can fill it in. So it's not limited to just people who actually receive it through the door or make notice of.
Oh, so anybody could complete the survey?
Yes.
I would have said anyway, even when we do get the data, it'd be so historical almost, there'd be no relevance to it anyway, really. It's just a point in historical time and we can't really do much about it anyway.
Well, it's talk, the data, they have to do it at the end of their contractual year, which is July, and they did do it on time this year. It's just that it didn't get the results that were needed, so they've had to redo it. But it does talk about the year before. So it's people's perceptions of what cleanliness, etc., has been like for that previous year. So, it's only referring to the last year of the contract. But obviously we're now in November and I'm still trying to...
So if you get it in December, even by then it's 5 months after the year end. There's almost no point getting the data really, is it?
Well, to be honest, the bits that we concentrate on more than anything is what they're required to do is produce an action plan, actually say it, unless of course it says how wonderful everything is. But if it doesn't say how wonderful everything is, then we do ask for an action plan actually saying how you're going to address these various findings. Now, for us, operationally, that is the more important thing.
Have we actually got the action plan now, Julie?
Can I just say, Chair, I'm just flogging a dead horse because this is really a completely redundant
that's my
conversation.
Point. That's my point.
Yeah.
But
it doesn't matter what the officers are doing.
No.
It doesn't matter what we're doing. They'll do what they want, and then they won't be in it any longer.
No, I haven't got the action plan because I need the final results broken down for them then to produce the action plan.
Right, I see, okay. So basically you get the final results, you agree an action plan collaboratively, and then they execute the action plan. Like Councillor Frenchman's at my point as well, it's a bit of a flogging a dead horse. It's historical data almost, and we'll see when it comes in basically. Councillor Paul.
If one is to believe the media with regards to this particular company, then there are other boroughs and districts in the north of England who are suffering the same problems as we. So it seems to me inherent within their company Far be it from me to call it bad practice, but there's no other way of looking
I
at
think
it.
it probably is. I mean, these companies don't just serve one customer badly, they generally serve lots of customers badly because it's the way they're organised, which is a disaster, quite frankly. But I don't think we can expect any more from Julie on that one, and I think we can move on to, I think that's all of them, Julie, isn't there? Or is there one
No,
more?
I've got one amber and one of the red that I'm pleased to say are not to do with the EMS contract. E4.1, council intervention leads to restoration, reuse or sustained productive use of listed buildings in the district.
Why is it amber? Because the target's nil and the achievement's nil, so it's green.
You know, I was just thinking that when I looked at it. I was just thinking, why is that amber?
It should be green.
Well spotted, Councillor French, but I think we're happy to...
It should be
It's at
green.
the end there, look.
And I don't know why it's not green. So apologies for that. It should be green.
Well, you asked with me.
I don't know how that's...
We've just improved our performance.
Yeah, I have actually. Yeah, we've only got 2 reds and no ambers, so sorry, I
It
wouldn't
strikes
get...
me without Amy we would have a lot higher level of performance, basically, which is good news.
So that is a good point, and I don't know how...
Did you have one more, Julie?
Yeah, I've got one more that is red, and it's gone into the red because the target's gone up for Q2. Conservation area appraisals carried out. This is one where we've had considerable problems actually recruiting an officer. An officer did start on the 3rd of October and has started to look at what can be done. But obviously that was too late. They didn't start till the 3rd of October and Q2 ended at the end of September. So that one has gone into the red. That officer has is starting to look now at a work programme and what can be done.
That was noted anyway in our previous meeting. In the minutes it says, although the accepted the next quarter's target went up in there.
Chairman, if I could just add to that, there was some discussion on this at the portfolio holders meeting and management offered that the 5 appraisals that have been identified will all be underway by the year end.
Oh good, so that could be amber by the year end in actual fact.
I think it will be red because we won't have completed them, but they will all be
right,
underway.
okay, so there'll be 5 ongoing.
Yes.
Good. Thank you, Tony.
And that is quite literally all I've got.
Good. Anybody got any other questions on the entire document? Councillor Paul, a couple of comments. Been through those. If nobody's got any further comments, we can wrap that one up. Julie, before, thank you for that. Julie, you were talking about, I think we had green flag with you, didn't we, actually?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't mentioned that because I did answer and it was green. But yes, we have got, it was E3.3 if you want to see it. But yes, we have got the Green Flag Award for the country park. So I have shown it as green and I have sent you the criteria around, but that is something that's in your...
yes, sure, and it's on the back page as well, I wanted to point out. You should have
it's in
seen
your
it
agenda
anyway,
ready for February.
I thought it'd be a nice job actually to be the green flag assessor. It's like they've got nice things to look at. They go around country parks. And
They do indeed, and I spent some time with one about 2 years ago looking at our country park, and they did go around and look at various things.
It's a nice, pleasant job. And we've also got the person coming in for the next meeting as well. Warman.
Chris Warman, yeah, who's very good, and again we've worked together in the past, so he'll give you the complete, how it works.
Good. Does anybody have any burning questions on the green flag that's in the back of your pack and the information Julie circulated what we have in front of us?
I do have a mini problem, Chairman, because we concentrate on the country park, and I assume that the country park has a designated zone. However, the country park is being extended. There is a vast amount of parkland to the north of Lang Farm. And when will that area be either designated as part of the country park or annexed to the country park? we have more public open space in Daventry now than we've ever had in Daventry's existence. The Eastern Way, which everybody talks about, is probably only about 4% of our total green space. But it's occurring to me that as the Muxmoor development goes further north, where the dam burst area is, and then tracking behind Lang Farm, where Councillor Howard lives, I'm just wondering if that will mould in. I'll take that up with officers anyway.
I think you probably have to actually, because I think, well, I mean, it's not in scope at the moment, clearly, because it's not part of the designated country park.
But it's made me wonder that.
Good question.
There is, anyway.
Perhaps one for you to take away yourself in your role, actually. Councillor Wesley.
Yeah, just I think part of the designation of the Green Flag Award is dependent on what sort of land it is and how it's actually managed and perceived. And I think Councillor Paul's comment about open space is a delineation of what type of space it is, because there are various sorts of green space, and one of those is suitable for the Green Flag Award, and other think others are not.
Well, I mean, the criteria are pretty clear, actually. I think. So I think some of those green spaces in the town would not really qualify for that purpose. But it's all about technical delineations. Good. Any final questions for Julie on the performance, corporate plan performance? Okay, good. Well, in that case, then, Julie, I think you're free to go if you wish.
I would be, but I would, if you wouldn't mind, just like to stay for 5C about the needs of fitness in rural areas.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what, actually, to make it easier for you, are we happy to switch the agenda around for item 5, so we go with 5C first? Yeah. So for keeping Julie all night, might have a few interesting points.
May I just add something which is part of the community strategy indicators, where we don't normally, or you don't normally comment on. However, there is one actually, which is B1, percentage of public-facing void premise in Daventry town centre. It is green, but I believe that it's worth noting that our void rates are about 4.1%, which is far below the national average. If you take places like Rugby, their town centre is emptying now, but I'm more than pleased to say that our town centre is well below average for empty premise. So I thought that would tie in with part of your good agenda later on, Chairman.
It does. Thank you, Councillor Paul. So that wraps that item up completely now, thank you. Let's move on to 5C, and then we'll go back to 5A and 5B. So, Councillor Brown, could you take us through your interim report? Yes. And give us any updates post this coming stuff. Thank you. Thank you, Tony. That's much better.
Okay, I'll just briefly go through the interim report, and I think I'll paragraph I'll fill you in on where I've got to. Because, since I wrote the interim report, I was lucky enough to attend the Daventry District Sports Awards, which are a key part of the district's attempts to publicise sporting activities across the district, not just the urban area but also rural areas, which I'm specifically looking at. They do a very effective job in promoting the ongoing role of sports clubs and local community groups in engaging the local population in physical activity. Now, we'll see on the progress to date, I did analyse Daventry calling articles over the past 12 months. I did, yeah. I went through Daventry calling for 12 months. Nice way to
I know you said that here, but it just kind of thought that's a fascinating thing. But mind you, there aren't that many to go through.
There aren't that many.
It's like
one per quarter.
Exactly.
So, just the last one. And
there you go, Councillor Howard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
whilst within Daventry calling, there is there isn't a great deal of focus on activities outside of Daventry town. I found that promotional activities is generally confined to those taking place at Daventry Leisure Centre. During my meeting with Councillor Hills, he quite rightly...
Chairman, I do apologise. I should have given Alan Hills apologies for this evening because he is quite unwell. And
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We'll note that retrospectively.
I do apologise.
Thank you. Okay, carry on.
Councillor Hills did highlight to me the important role of everyone active and the leisure centre in engaging people across the district. Particularly in terms of school holiday activities. They use communities such as Brixworth, Moulton and Woodford Holt as hubs to provide sporting activities for a particularly younger section of the community. During their school holiday times, it also provides, in Councillor Hill's words, a very economical childcare option. It allows people to...
Councillor Brown, you'd be interested to know we did quite a bit of work on looking at that contract, and we had some of that data coming forward to us about when it was in use, etc. Particularly looking at pitches, and that was following Councillor Hill's coming into Scrutiny one time last year, so that all ties up. Thank you.
I have conducted as a sample site visits at village halls across my own ward to establish what kind of events are ongoing there. There are a variety of fitness activities such as aerobics classes and what have you. They tend to be confined to the larger villages, but again we're returning to that idea of the larger communities within our district being used as hubs. I think it would be unrealistic to expect
Brockhall, for instance.
and what have you. Yeah,
You've got a big hall at Brockhall, haven't you? I mean, sure that's
a
nice garden to walk around.
So yeah, there is that variety. But I did want to highlight the findings of the Northamptonshire Director of Public Health report. That report established that of the 1 in 5 deaths classified as avoidable in 2015-16, 60% of those could have been prevented by public health involvement, such as getting people more active. Also established that unhealthy lifestyles are behind 40% of ill health, and that 41% of Northamptonshire's population are inactive. However, Daventry district is the best performing district within Northamptonshire, so we are beating the trend within our own county.
That's good. That's good news. Why is it Daventry district would be beating the trend? Is it because of some of the initiatives you've spoken about?
I believe that the district council is being active in promoting physical activities and supporting its local community groups.
Maybe this is partly down to people like Councillor Alan Mills and his passion for that.
Absolutely. Councillor Hills has been running the Daventry District Sports Force for 15 years. Yeah. Played a leading role in that. We also have the grants panel within DDC that has supported provided over £3,000 of funding for sports events. Roughly 50% of that funding has gone to rural groups. Over £7,000 has gone to rural community groups, which provide socially supporting activity, and over £30,000 of infrastructure funding to support pitches and the like across the district. District Council has also been active in promoting walking football and netball to serve the needs of the older population. However, the impression that I've formed so far is that the focus is primarily on the younger members of the community, and certainly my task panel from here on in will be looking further into whether there isn't a disproportionate focus on young people, although get them young, get them active is certainly a valid ethos, but it's never too late to improve lifestyles and prevent ongoing health problems.
Before I move into the floor, can I make a couple of comments on this first sheet? Going back to the point about adequate provision, how do you know what adequate provision is, and when will you know that has been satisfied?
Quite so. It's a very valid question. I think it would be a case of looking at trends across the country, establishing benchmarking precisely, and seeing where Daventry falls on that benchmark in terms of supporting community groups and ensuring that we are serving the needs of rural communities. I am due to interview Melanie Bland of Everyone Active to procure some more hard data on the demographics of leisure centre users in terms of their postcodes and whether we are effectively targeting people in the rural areas, and the leisure centre isn't simply serving the urban community.
Good. And there was one more figure I wanted to question. In here you said 41% of Northamptonshire's population are inactive. That astonished me. What do you mean by inactive? What's the definition of inactive in respect to that statistic?
It's a definition used by the Northamptonshire Director of Public Health. I need to seek clarification on how exactly they define inactive. I believe it does boil down to the number of minutes of physical activity per week. I can't remember if it got
It does,
my head.
yeah.
I thought it was 20 minutes a day or something.
I think it's 5 times 30 minutes of activity per week.
I know there'll be a strict definition.
Yes.
That's
I smiled earlier, Chairman, because when Councillor Brown said young, Councillor Miller is part of the walking football club.
So indeed is Councillor Hills.
Yes, indeed, yes.
Councillor Hills is one of those councillors who never acts his age, of course. Do we have any? Julie?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a few points, to be honest, and I'm sure you're aware of all these. In terms of what we're talking about is almost, rural sports development. Sports development and sports development contacts is a key performance indicator in our contract with Everyone Active. So they are required to develop sport, and there is a definition for what's classed as sports development. So if somebody just turns up for a fun hour, that it has to be something that's continuous, etc. It's something I report on. It's something they have absolutely exceeded their target on every month since they've started. They do provide me, again, I report on this and I'll happily give you all the data, but they provide me with a list of the activities that they do each month, and it certainly is far-reaching. They do a number of rural road shows. You've mentioned walking football, walking netball, etc. They've really looked at taking the sport to the community, and one of the things they've done very, very well is they try and enable the community to actually deliver their own sport as well. And I would like to say SLM have done an absolutely excellent job on that, and it's certainly not something I have concerns about.
It's a shame they don't manage our bins, isn't it?
In terms of, I also report on, and I do look at the age groups, and they do have a fantastic range of activities from literally 2 years to 95. They really do look at, and they do all things like Nordic walking's another very good one that's more for, I'm not going to say the over 50s, but more for the older generation, or the less fit generation, maybe I would say. So they do look, and I report again on the range of the activities that they provide. So you're obviously aware of that. I have all those figures. I also have all the figures in terms of, we've done a lot of work in terms of who the leisure centre actually attracts. We have the demographics, we have their membership demographics, and I'm sure you'll be aware we've done a lot of work in actually looking at the need for possibly an additional leisure centre in another part of our district. So that, in terms of doing all that work, we've actually really looked at who is using our facilities and who is using facilities elsewhere. The other thing that I should mention is about just over a year ago, we did commission consultants to actually write a sports strategy for us. And that was actually driven by the very fundamental thoughts as to, have we got enough facilities, who are they serving, and are we providing for everybody in our district, not just those in the town, but for the whole district.
By the way, do you have that document? Have you seen that?
I was just going to say, it's it's an absolutely huge job. We're working in partnership with MBC in terms of delivering it, because it's not, you have to look at a lot of our residents actually use facilities in Northampton or Rugby or Market Harbour, depending on where they live. And one of the things we were really looking at across those two projects, both the sports strategy and the work I've done with other consultants, I'm looking at additional needs for a leisure centre, we've done a lot of work on what facilities are there and who's actually using where. Now we've used, with the current sports strategy work, we've used the various data available from Sport England, Active People, Active Places, that really tries to model who is going where. It looks at demographics, it looks at travel time, etc, etc. We have some kind of very early draft reports that's come out of that, but it is, we always knew it was going to be at least a 12-month process. I did have a draft come out this week that I haven't yet gone through, which is kind of the next bit, looking at some more bits. They have done a lot of work on really trying to talk at to as many people as possible in the parishes, i.e. sports clubs, community users, etc. So we have done a lot of work on that, and they've pulled that together. And I should mention as well, SLM also are contracted each year to do a non-user survey. So again, they try to get at actually the people that aren't using the leisure centre. So there is a lot of work there. No, I haven't got it because it's not completed. Once it's completed, by all means, yes, we will share it with you. And one of the things Simon and I were talking about early this morning actually was we need that to actually direct where do we go next as a council in terms of either provision or supporting or whatever. Because you can look at, do we actually look at providing new additional facilities, or do we try and work much more with the schools, the individual, parishes where they've got little hubs or whatever, to try and make better use of those facilities? But until we've got that sports strategy there and that's come out, and we're also very much having to look at, what are Northampton likely to do, what are maybe, Market Harbour likely to do, because if Northampton were to build a big new leisure centre, to replace Links Forum, that would have quite a, we know that a lot of our residents actually use facilities in Northampton, and we've got that evidence. So, we do have an awful lot of work going on in this whole area.
Okay. I would argue quite strongly that in terms of the approach to take, it needs to be a bilateral approach, that you don't just do in terms of flooding facilities.
Oh yeah. No, it could well be, but again, the idea of that sports strategy was very much to direct. We get a lot of requests in saying, will you help us fund a football pitch here? Will you help us fund an Astro pitch there?
Yes.
We needed the evidence to say this is what our need is.
So take a coherent approach.
And that should guide those decisions. And you're right, it should be a combination of different answers.
Before we come to any further comments, I've got some ideas here. Councillor Frenchman, you had your hand up a little bit.
Yeah, you paint a very rosy picture, but anecdotally, and I'm prepared to be wrong, I don't believe it. Because I lived in Spratton for 22 years and I was looking for sporting activities and there were none apart from the football club there. And we were never offered anything by anybody ever. And because of the geographical position of Spratton particularly, the access is appalling. So I would actually say that the rosy picture you're painting I don't recognise from my living in the village.
I'm not quite sure what you mean by what I'm saying is there's a lot of work going on.
But there's no over the 22 years I lived in Spratton, I never saw anything from Daventry in terms of outreach, if I can put it that way, in terms of offering, running or any sporting activities. I saw occasional the health walks that get promoted and occasional holiday, school holiday clubs, but they're not accessible. So it's silly to offer them because the kids can't get there on their own. The parents are at work. So actually, it's a fundamentally different approach to delivery in a village than it is in Daventry. And I would say almost 100%. And again, you can prove me wrong. That the draw of the leisure centre is local. It's not as Stratton. I never went to I went once to Daventry. We used to go to Market Harbour, if anywhere, but even there it's a bit of a drag because it's a 15-20 mile drive.
I think that's kind of the point partly he's making.
That's not what I got from listening to you.
No, the early the leisure centre can do so much, and they're trying. One of the things, and this has been a crucial part of feeding back into sports strategy work is going on, is what are we actually responsible for? Because some of the development and some of the sports development, you know, we're looking at, and what the sports strategy will actually say is, well, these are recommendations, but they're not all recommendations that we as a council can deliver. So it could be down to the, for instance, what's the governing body doing to try and engage sport in that area, as one example. You know, what are the local sports clubs doing? It's not just down to what Daventry can deliver. What is the school doing? In terms of your point about Stratton, this is our biggest issue. The indicative reports of the sports strategy have actually said there is no one location within Daventry district that is actually the best location to put another facility. What we actually need is half a swimming pool lane in about 10 different places, because it's very the way they work it all out, it's very calculated, and it's, you know, all done on population and need and age and demographics, etc. And that is exactly the problem. We are such a huge district, whatever we do will not actually help a lot of what's called the unmet demand. And we do know that an awful lot of our residents are using facilities outside of Daventry district. We know that because they're much nearer. If you're on the edge of district, it's nearer to go to Northampton. We know that.
Well, just 3 quick points that really I think you should be looking at. One is access. One is a survey of village amenities, which I'm sure you're doing.
That's in the sports.
The third one is Malton College.
Yep.
They have a fantastic swimming pool at the Chris Moody Centre that they don't let anybody use. I think they ought to be arm twisted very heavily to be made to open that to a wider audience, because I've been there several times and it's never in use.
Before you come back in, Julia, Councillor Frenchman, can I suggest that you have a longer conversation with Councillor Brown outside the room? Because I really appreciate the debate. It's a nice change from talking about the bins on the first one.
Yes.
And I know what you mean about feeling rosy about him, and I genuinely felt more excited by that conversation and things were better, but I do accept the point about the periphery. But I think that'll be very useful, because it's only an interim report, don't forget, and that's the whole point of it. So before, Julie, you come back, let me take a point from Councillor Wesley, then Councillor Boylan, back to you, Julie, okay? And Councillor Brown's noting all this down so he knows what to do next. Councillor Wesley.
I think some of what I was going to say has been covered, but I was just going to say, obviously in lots of villages there are football clubs and cricket clubs, which is the same I mentioned them, but what I would say from my experience, although I've lived in Daventry most of my married life anyway, it was 30 odd years, but my kids did used to go to Newnham School, and we spent a lot of time at Newnham. And what you find is that I think, and this is perhaps what you need to get hold of, is there's quite a lot of informal groups that actually do have their own sporting activities. I mean, for instance, we used to play 5-a-side football, 7-a-side football, and 11-a-side football, and that encompassed teenagers through to people of 50 years old. On the back of that, there was also sort of rounders tournaments and things like that. When I was clerking at Watford, I was aware of an informal cycle club that would meet out of the village and then go off and go wherever and go cycling. So I think what we need to grab hold of here is, and it sort of comes back to this report, is that the villages, people out in the villages, are having to do quite a lot of things sort of for themselves. You know, their own informal little football tournaments in the leisure centre, Brands Road, or wherever it may be, and that happens actually quite a lot. Just little informal groups of people that get together that you won't see on village notice boards, because it's like 5 blokes down the pub that play 5 blokes down the pub, or play their works teams and things like that. And I think that's what you do actually find that in villages. So they may not be flagging up as active, but there's actually probably a lot more activity than anybody thinks.
And quite frankly, some of them don't necessarily involve the council in their activities.
And it's finding it. And it's
why would you?
Exactly. So it doesn't have to involve the council, but as far as how it works, it probably works for them, and therefore it's either an issue or not an issue. They could be saying we need a facility but we haven't got one, or actually we're quite happy going hither and thither wherever.
I would add that actually Alan, Councillor Hills, in his portfolio role has provided ad hoc support to Malton Magpies Football Club, Longboat Long Buckby Rugby Football Club and the Weedham Sports Association in submitting planning applications for various infrastructure improvements. So there is that slightly
more of course not too long ago.
Unfortunately, their new pavilion's been slightly held up by a slight hand grenade problem.
Councillor Paul, you had a quick comment.
Yes, thank you. 4 letters, SOLL, SOL, were the management of the leisure centre. I was part of that board. I was part of it being wound up, thank God. I like Julie's presentation. It does sound like roses, and quite rightly so, because the leisure centre has gone in leaps and bounds since this company has been responsible for its running. The other side of the coin is I played table tennis in Scrutiny on more than one occasion, and they used to be in the Daventry table tennis league, so we used to go to Scrutiny even if it was afterwards in the pub, but nevertheless, but if you want to live in a village, sometimes you have to suffer being in a village. If you can have 1,000 houses if you want and have a leisure centre, the choice is yours. But there are difficulties of living in a village. One of the things that we worked on, that I heard of whilst I was in Germany, Badminton England were having difficulties in maintaining their premise in Milton Keynes. And Simon approached Badminton England for talks to see if we could encourage them to come to Daventry to build a state-of-the-art centre. Their current building in Milton Keynes is not fit for purpose. However, we've drawn a blank so far on that. Most disappointed. The other one that Councillor Frenchman didn't mention was Ramblers. There are God knows how many Ramblers in the county for fitness, which, on the whole, all of a sudden we've become fitness conscious. And it's only been in this last 5 years when we decided that everybody should get fit. We don't have enough facilities, purely and simply because we are all obese, including me. We're all obese, and it's become a health issue in the last 5 years. Up until 5 years ago, it wasn't that prominent in there. But I wish, and I have tried to say on many occasions, I would love to create a village environment in Daventry, and the reason being is because villages have a community, and because villages will put on a fete, a cart rally, and all the rest of it.
I'll stop you there.
Yeah,
Sorry. Can I make a recommendation? You speak to each other.
Yes.
I know you've got some good ideas and insight to put into it. And those anecdotes are very useful. And the Milton Keynes one put me in mind of the Milton Keynes, obviously being the MK Dons, etc. But let's leave it for there now. Going back to the earlier point, our job is to be professionally sceptical on this committee anyway, in regards to seeing things as rosy. But Julie, can I give you a last comment, because I know you had your hand up before we go back to Councillor Brown to finish this one off.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of looking at facilities in the sports villages, in all the little villages, sports strategy is doing, that's exactly what it's doing, looking at everything we can find out at the minute. Again, going back to what I said was its recommendations have to look at who can influence and who can do what. Certainly what is coming out is we know there are facilities in schools and Malton College that aren't readily available to the public. But it's not always something we as a council can directly influence. We can't go in and force Malton College or the schools to suddenly open them up. But one of the things we can look at and are looking at and are waiting for the sports strategy to come out and say is, well, perhaps we could work with you, and it might be something we looked at our own leisure contractor doing, is actually saying, well, we could hire the facilities out for you, we could promote them, etc.
We could apply some leverage and at least have a comment. I think the best thing to do there, Julie, is Councillor Brown, if you can have a good session with Julie on this and look at some of the options and really bring those to the tables as well. Obviously, don't collide with the sports strategy, which is in development, but obviously see if we can complement it.
I think it was just the point that there is an awful lot of work going on that will provide you with, a lot of what you're looking at, and by all means, as soon as we've got it, you're welcome, to sift through. And the one final comment I was going to say is just something that was said here before. It is very true that some of those groups actually are quite informal groups, and we actually have a club that is one of them. They're a group of adults that want to go and play. They don't want to develop. They don't actually want more members or whatever. That it is a kind of enjoyable night out. And again, we have to we recognise that if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. Different people have different needs and different designs.
Exactly. Make people informal. Thank you very much, Julie. So let's wrap. I want to wrap that page up, but I still want to quickly visit the page. But to wrap that up, I think Councillor Brown's good to have your fresh pair of eyes on this topic. Some very good inputs from the committee there and Julie in particular, and some good challenges back from Councillor Frenchman. So I had a conversation with Councillor Frenchman, Councillor Paul, and anybody else is of course welcome to get involved and contribute. We'll have the report back in February.
Yes.
You know the timetable as well. We usually make that very clear. Let's clip over to the next page 34. Did anybody have any feedback on the? This hasn't gone out yet. That's correct, is it?
That's correct. Yes, and actually. Councillor Hill should provide some feedback on the questionnaire, simply to say that it should be slightly rejigged to lead to slightly more in-depth answers to come back from the parishes. And, initially, I was trying to keep it fairly simple so that the data that was returned was more easily quantifiable. But yeah, any feedback on this would be appreciated. I do like to use parish councils as eyes and ears and representatives of the community. And my idea on this was simply to take a cross-section of parish councils across each.
So it's a cross-section. You're not sending it to all of them?
No.
How are you deciding which ones to send it to?
I was going to send it to the largest community in each ward, followed by two further communities in each ward.
Okay. Does anybody have any feedback on this questionnaire? It's on page 34, I'm sure you've all read it. Yeah?
Just a few comments. First of all,
you do data for a living, don't you?
Do data for a living, excellent.
The word organised is a little bit intangible, really. What do you mean by organised? I think we discussed that anyway in terms of more laissez-faire groups. I think the other thing, sort of regular basis as well, quantifying what that is. Is that daily, weekly, monthly? That could be simple as that, just a tick box. And the selection of, I don't know what anybody else thinks about the selection of the parish councils themselves, but I think making sure there is some involvement, engagement in those smaller, I think I'd like a larger ward, but the smaller, because access is such a problem for them anyway, as we've discussed.
I'd have sent it to all the parishes. To be honest, it's only an email. You'll only get 20 if that replying anyway. So it becomes self-selecting, but you usually find the more active parishes, big and small, will respond. The ones with the more active clerks. And I agree, I think organised sporting should perhaps be changed to something like formal and informal, or something like that.
Or you can go, Councillor Pitchett, is that a better term in your opinion?
I'd have to think about it before, I've got a questionnaire, but yeah, it's better, certainly.
Leave it in and then the other two.
So yeah, well, you could put brackets around it, etc. So if anybody's got any ideas, just send them across. But anybody got any other firm comments or suggestions? So I think the cross section is a very good one. Actually, I would simply go for all of them, and you get at least people can't say they've been denied the opportunity to respond. I think probably a little bit more on objectives as well. And actually, rather than even to whom may concern, I'd probably address it to the parish clerk, maybe. Quite specifically.
Or to the chair, actually.
Or to the chair, so be specific in terms of the title, or of course if you have that contact. And where it says Whedon, I'd probably put a yours sincerely, Whedon Award or whatever, and this Daventry District Council, and obviously the purpose of what we're doing here on this committee. And maybe some boxes, and also on the third question, I'd put 90, because it says 1965 and 65 plus. I'm not sure if that should be 19 to 64 and 65 and plus, but anyway, so I think that's pretty right. Actually, I'm not sure. But I think
I'd also say that's quite a big age range, and you should have some.
Yeah, no, and it was more establishing the adults and then the elderly.
19 is still young, I tell you.
1965 is a big group, isn't it? Actually, yeah.
Because they're actually at around 35-ish, perhaps 40 now.
You're moving into senior.
You become completely different, so that might be a slightly better break, natural break, in terms of sports anyway.
Good point. And I'd also...
one last question.
Yeah.
It might be, is there any facilities they would wish that they had, as it were, or could provide, just as like a wish list? And if every parish says exactly the same wish spooky, then it would say to Julie, we perhaps need to provide it.
Because I think actually going back to that
through the leisure centre that we might be building.
So my only concern would be that they'll all traditionally say, yes, we want a swimming pool, yes, we want a leisure centre, and let's be realistic here about the resources we've got and what we can actually do. And I'm always just a little bit wary of raising too much expectations because we can't quite
That's what their aspirations. I mean, in Stratton, one of the aspirations we have is actually to have a badminton court, which is nothing. We wouldn't dream of asking for a swimming pool, but we would like a badminton court.
I no reason why it couldn't be in the village hall.
One moment, let's restore some order. One moment, Councillor Pritchard.
I concur with Councillor Frenchman as well. I think you can ask those questions. I don't think anyone in the right mind would ask the swimming pools in a little village, actually. I know this is a bit hyperbole, but I'm not well expected to get it, really. Moreover, things like the help could be perhaps transport out of hours to convey people to the leisure centre. That might emerge in terms of access. I'm not going to say swimming pools.
Yeah, perhaps you can set it up anyway by saying, this is not about requesting what you want, but really understanding where you will be. What about also actually about strategy? Would we expect them to have a strategy themselves on them? Probably not actually.
No. I think in some neighbourhood plans there's reference to sports facilities, certainly Whedon's there is.
Yeah, so that's probably yes, the villages was like
Dr. Hand Grenade.
And I think finally, I would also say, do you have any, probably a kind of catch-all box, do you have any further comments or feedback on sports, etc.? And then please consolidate that. And of course, one thing you probably should be recommended to do is obviously do some follow-ups. Maybe there's a little focus group, or maybe just go meet them or whatever if you get some good responses. That'll make a very good report. Good catch, Pritchard.
Just thoughts about how you're going to represent this data. You're going to put it in, what data you capture, how you're going to represent it in terms of just that might guide you in terms of some of the questions you might ask.
Yeah,
how you're going to represent.
Good thinking. How you manage the data once you've actually got it. True academic. Very good. Thank you. Any further comments on that one? Good. In that case, then, Julie, that's that bit rearranged for you. Thank you, Councillor Brown. That's great. Look forward to getting the full report for the next meeting. Please ensure you hit the deadline. And as you all know, the deadlines are really important because we have to work back and it gets a bit of a crunch. And I don't answer my emails every day either, as I'm also working. So it's kind of good to get that organised. Good, thank you, Julie, much appreciated. Thank you for the input. Councillor Brown will be in touch, have a good discussion about the support strategy there. Right, let's go back up the agenda again. So the next item on the agenda is 5A, which is empty commercial property. Councillor Pritchard to present the final report. So on this one, Councillor Pritchard, what we traditionally do in this committee is you actually talk us through the salient points of the report. Obviously, you gave us a report last time in terms of a full presentation. So it's only a very quick, high-level summary, and then take us through the recommendations. And we'll have a quick discussion of recommendations, and we'll agree or otherwise.
Yeah, if I loiter and push me on different paragraphs.
That's okay. I'm sure you'll do fine. We'll let you know.
Okay. So this is reviewing the extensive nature of empty commercial properties. Some background.
I need to establish how many empty commercial properties there were in the district initially, which I've done. The Scrutiny Improvement Committee created a task panel to examine the extent and type of the empty commercial properties within the district. Currently that figure, 26 and 16, there's 271, which are listed in Appendix 1. Without doubt, the introduction, success and continued development of online retail has led to an increase in the vacancy rate of retail and commercial properties. Allied to this, traditional office practices within bespoke regional town allocations become much more centralised into larger units. Financially untenable are being replaced with a connected infrastructure allowing home working. And the above background is then further exacerbated by the global financial downturn, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Analysis of both quantitative and qualitative data was made, ensuring a mixed methodology approach.
Could you explain what that is to members of the committee who may not understand that concept?
Okay, to capture both people's thoughts, the voice of business owners, as well as drilling down on some data employment figures, provides more comprehensive capture of the problem and some of the thoughts and solutions around the district. So I gave focus to a time period from the economic downturn. What I wanted to do is make sure that there wasn't any sort of negative impact upon employment figures particularly, and job seekers, which was positive news within this report regarding those. I think it was important to look at the type and nature of the empty commercial properties. If we look at why these properties have been vacated and not being occupied again. Then move on to 4.4, type and nature.
Before you carry on, actually, Kensbridger, why did you look at specifically about job seekers figures? Why would you choose that set of data? And could you explain what you mean by triangulation between the data?
Okay, we've got a start point from 2008, economic downturn, where if you look in the appendixes, we've got quite a lot of properties that are starting to be vacated. From that time, there's a high amount over the next 3 to 4 years, actually. What I wanted to make sure is how big is the problem? We've got vacancy rates listed. How's that impacting on Daventry residents in terms of employment and job seekers were two parameters that we could look at to make sure that the current situation isn't detrimental to the populace, to the citizens of Daventry, which is why I provide that focus. Okay. The majority of empty commercial properties were offices and premises. It's really important to highlight the type and nature. And numerous vacancies were evident for a multitude of differing account holders. By nature of the ownership, the greatest number of building premises and portfolio size, the two predominant account holders were Weedon Garrison Limited and Icon Operations Limited, and after that, Daventry District Council.
Can you clarify? So, are you saying in here that Daventry District Council owned 24 vacant properties? Have I understood the data correctly? Yeah. And Weedon Garrison Limited had 30 and etc. At the point of your analysis.
At the point of analysis, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So it makes no distinction between size. I mean,
No,
some of ours are very small, whereas some of the Weedon ones are very big.
But there's a bit more information about
Is there?
Yeah.
Okay, but
type.
that's
Simon has added some information about that. They do not amount to the sizable amount of commercial space the DDC holdings include similar rooms at Abbey Centre, as well as various commercial properties, some of which have been let since the vacant property list was generated. DDC vacant holdings also include a number of buildings acquired for town centre redevelopment. The Weedon Garrison properties all form part of the Grade 2 list of Weedon Depot and are by their nature challenging to secure modern occupiers for. Other vacant properties include NCC sponsorship sites and open land for storage, 3 closed pubs, reflecting changing leisure habits, and 4 disused mobile telephone base stations. I think I'll move on from that. Okay.
There's no new commercials. What's there? Excellent. Good analysis.
Yeah. I think subsequent major lists is important. So we've got that one type, offices and premises. We've got warehouse and premises listed, and we've got workshop and premises.
Can you tell us, Kensbridger, what do you mean by offices and premises? Because by definition, a premise is just a building that's a building, isn't it?
That's the listing from the data provided by.
Yeah, it's curious.
Simon and others, yeah.
Workshop and premises. Tony, do you have any?
I think that to do with business rate classifications.
Right. Okay. So it's simply called premises.
Yeah, I couldn't offer any greater definitions.
No.
Is it not referring to the warehouse and the associated premises? It's not necessarily just the warehouse space, but the offices attached to the warehouse.
So it doesn't. Hopefully, it doesn't change the kind of clarity of their thinking and the conclusions anyway.
No.
Okay. Simply classification. Councillor Paul, do you have any light to throw on this in your portfolio? On this specific respect of premises, not conclusions.
Well, the premise, I wonder, because I would assume that this information in Appendix 1 has come from Reverend Ben's office.
Councillor Pritchard, can you tell us where you remind everybody? Oh, Tony, wait.
I think, Chairman, if we just look at offices, warehouse, and workshop, and as somebody suggested, the premises, the car park, the other bits associated with those activities.
Okay, it doesn't have a material impact on our
no, but the data does come from revenues and benefits, and it is from the business rating list. So the classifications will come from the valuation office agency who do the classifications.
Good, thank you. In that case, Councillor Paul, you can step back in and we'll carry on with Councillor Pritchard.
Yeah, thank you.
It's okay, you don't need to answer now, we can carry on. We'll bring you back in when we come to. I wanted to resolve that point, but I think we cracked it. Yeah. Okay.
To provide some context, on the 18th of October 2016, the total number of rateable properties in the district was 2,768, of which 275 were empty, which is interesting really because the figures are increasing. You can see there's a 271 to 275. You might think it's minimal, but that's a trend data that we're looking at as well. What I wanted to do was get trend data from the year before and the year before incrementally, but that wasn't available, fortunately.
What wasn't available? What was the issue?
I asked for it and it wasn't available, or it wasn't forthcoming.
What do you mean by it wasn't forthcoming? They didn't have it, or wouldn't let you have it? Or?
The data that was given to me was included in an appendix. As it is, no other data was forwarded, which it might, to be fair to the person who I asked, it might be the way I asked the question, as always.
Right, it can be a data acquisition. I think you learn more as you
yes, indeed.
You're in the role.
To be fair, yeah. But, again, positive. When we look at Daventry District Council, it's been suggested by DDC Business Manager that the district is performing very well. Fairly low rate of empty commercial properties when compared to other areas. The portfolio of DDC in particular is performing well and is subsequently financially successful, of which acknowledgement to DDC managers and officers must be made. In relation to liaison between DDC and account holders and agents, this is less clear. Although DDC has no obligation to act as an intermediary between account holders, agents and potential customers, the development of this relationship is needed. This liaison may reveal ways in which DDC could assist account holders, identify incentives or grants, and provide impact through innovation. The digital portal being one innovation which could provide links and information for potential prospective commercial tenants.
We'll revisit that in your recommendations, so of course that's well. Councillor Frenchman,
You actually skipped a little point that I think was quite important, where you said the total rateable value is 103 million for the district, but the empty properties only account for 3 million of it, which, as you quite rightly say, is generally small, low value. Is that the problem, that they're not actually now what you might call
desirable?
Desirable, that's the word for anybody, and that some, as you then go on to say, some sort of incentive or regeneration of them possibly should be looked at.
Yeah, I think it's when we come to the qualitative sort of comments from some interviewee, they're quite salient actually to that point.
Thank you.
So where are we? Sorry.
You're in employment now.
Employment. So we looked at employment figures from 2008. Analysing employment levels and trends for Daventry, it was noted that current figures up to March 2016, Daventry has the highest rate of employment since figures were available to the reporter going back to 2004. So we're now analysing this data. There was a dramatic fall in employment with the economic downturn in July 2008, as you would expect. It took some time, 6 years, to recover to those levels again. And we look, you can see on that table, you've got Daventry, East Midlands and GB, and we can see how well Daventry is performing in terms of employment. The difference between I'll move on to job seekers actually, that's okay.
Yes, please, yeah.
When analysing the job seekers figures from Daventry also and providing further triangulation between these figures, we've noted that by analysing the latest figures provided, the lowest job seekers figures since August 1999 were recorded. Again, direct increase around the end of 2008, and this did not return to previous levels until August 2014. What I'm trying to demonstrate is that we've got a period of up to 6 or 7 years where people were struggling, the district was struggling in terms of reaching back, going back to those previous levels. So I can deduce that despite the number of empty commercial properties being realised, and it was 271 initially, this has had no adverse effects on percentage of job seekers either.
So that's a really key point, isn't it? So empty property and number of job seekers or unemployed, there's no direct link between the two at this point.
There's a correlation.
No. Good word, correlation. Yeah.
And then I would have liked to have done more work on this, but time didn't allow. But the qualitative interview. So the interviewee confirmed the economic downturn hit small businesses very hard, and independent retailers were unable to compete with larger conglomerates and online e-commerce.
Can I stop you there, please? What did you? How did you select the interviewee, and why did you only interview one interview? I know time was a factor. By the way, I also recognise you took this over from Councillor Randall, and that's appreciated. So can you tell us a bit about thinking about how you selected the interviewee and why that particular interview was?
Yeah.
And sorry, also, how do we know that interviewee's views are representative?
We don't. Quite honestly, make that point, as I had before I delivered this part of the report. However, what I will say, this individual has businesses within Daventry around the economic downturn, and it has businesses within Daventry and within villages. So a good individual that can tell me about the context of 2008 and how it affected them, and also how he's doing now in terms of business owner of two different rural and town centre properties. So, fairly representative, but I like a big sample.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, I mean, you better than anybody would know that that's not fully representative, but it is an helpful informant nonetheless. Yeah.
So where were we? The incremental effective increase in energy rates, established business rates, and decreased footfall all contributed to great difficulties in 2008. When discussing the current availability of empty commercial properties, he stated that many retail units seem very small, especially within the town centre, unadaptable, and some are in a poor state of repair. The financial outlay to remember this would not be recouped. And then Simon Powers has added this in terms of the council broader plans to address Daventry Town Centre as expressed in the Daventry Town Centre Vision 2021 and Daventry 2040 Master Plan are focused on creating new businesses which would be attractive to multiples and others wanted larger modern floor plans. This is intended to increase footfall, which will in turn make smaller historic properties more attractive to operate as niche and independent shops and cafes. And I'm glad those are his words, because that's one of my recommendations as well.
Good. So basically, he gave you some advice in his role that we were able to incorporate into the report. Yep. Makes sense. And of course, we've seen, only today, I think it was Marks and Spencer said it was 30 stores, is it? Yeah.
And they think one of them might be Northampton.
Oh, really? Okay. So quite an interesting churn in the estate. And
they're opening a lot more food stores.
More food stores, yes. So changing the position. But interesting opportunities. Perhaps Councillor Paul earlier said about basically just the changing nature of these aspects as well. Okay, let's carry on again.
Overall, the proportion of commercial property in the district which is vacant is low. Much of it is vacant for specific reasons, such as forming part of historic complex or being a specialist property, which is not readily suitable for conversion. However, vacant property does represent opportunities not taken. 5.1, if there's going to be a change in the numbers of vacant commercial properties, there has to be some leading edge electronic marketing in a way in which the total amount of available properties are identified, accessed and listed. This could be achieved by the creation of a database, digital portal with individual domain listing and attached to the main DDC website. This would include a current, clear and demonstrative listing of properties with access to the agents. This would inform citizens and business that DDC is taking proactive steps to protect and improve the district's commercial future. The liaison, even if this is cursory with account holders, has potential for improving vacancy rates also. This would have to be a recurrent year-round liaison, providing officer interviews, ownership intentions and practical advice, and provides an important relationship between the council and property owners. The need for innovative solutions in relation to improving the current vacancies for retail and office properties lie predominantly with implementing the town centre vision. Outside of this area, consideration of change of purpose and potential regeneration of bespoke area where vacancy rates are higher, so looking at high void rates. In relation to repurposing, at those liaison discussions, much emphasis should be placed in appropriate cases upon the viability of changing properties into residential lettings. Potentially this will be the future of many of the vacated retail and office premises outside of Daventry Town Centre. Specialist employment sites such as Heartlands market indicators suggest reoccupation by retail and office interest will not be realised anytime soon. In relation to the rebranding of the commercial area with schemes and themes, an independent flavour may provide increased footfall to that area and additional areas within Daventry Town Centre if an area with sufficient levels of voice is identified. This would take identification of funding, consultation with current business and design input with marketing saturation. 5.5 priority should be given to vacant properties which have an adverse effect on their locality. And then conclusion, 7, it is the Town Panel suggestion within the report that its recommendations are adopted. Strategy, improvements and impact are required on the number of empty commercial properties. These recommendations would require an allocation of funding that will need to be determined. The adoption of these recommendations may then directly benefit investors, employees and citizens of Daventry District. If these recommendations are adopted, this will require the expertise, commitment and leadership of council, officers, elected members and managers. The report's recommendations are made in full understanding of the current and future impact of e-commerce. If the recommendations are adopted, close scrutiny and continual audit should be in place to determine their effectiveness.
Very good, thank you. So we got through it. Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Well done. And before we go into a little bit of discussion, thank you very much for producing a well-structured report. As I said, I appreciate you took that over from Councillor Randall. It's been a long time in the system, this one, so I'm glad we come to fruition this evening with this one. Thank you for your effort. And I think, obviously, as we'd expect from you, a well-constructed argument, particularly based on good data. And also thank the officers to support you as well. So, with that, you've had the report, you've read the report, you've heard the report verbally. Let's move into the recommendations. Actually, before we move into recommendations, anybody got any comments? Quick comments about the report and questions. Councillor Paul first of all, and then Councillor Wesley.
I'll let Councillor Wesley go first.
Very good, Councillor Wesley, off you go.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you. I think it's a really, really interesting report. I think especially potential for conversion to vacant premises. I mean, my work is working for Travis Perkins in their marketing department, and you do see you sort of see a little bit of input in where things are going in terms of building and construction and how things are going, and it is multi-use. It's sort of multiple use, multiple function buildings in small locale with very, very niche places. That's seen as quite a big thing going forward, and I think if this council can maybe get hold of that, there's a real potential in there to actually do something else.
So recycling, basically.
Yeah, the recycling thing.
Recycling.
It's like living above the shop scenario as well, which is probably coming more to the fore just to make it actually work as a viable unit.
I think we have to look across to rugby. Actually, every week you see in rugby at the moment there's kind of concern in Rugby Advertiser about the state of the moving town and the letters, and I don't think we don't have that level of animosity about the way we're running town actually, which is welcome, and perhaps there are some issues there. Before I come to you, Councillor, let's go to Councillor Frenchman. I think particularly as it affects you, Councillor Paul, you have some useful comments.
If you look at Northampton, they rebranded Abington Street in the way that I think you've suggested here for some areas, which is quite good. But I think there is a particular opportunity for Weedon Barracks, which is a bee in my bonnet about the way it's just falling into disrepair. And I think it just needs some extra input and impetus from us as elected officials, because otherwise it's just going to crumble into itself, and a whole opportunity both for tourism, leisure and commercial properties is going to be completely lost.
Yeah.
So I would like to see possibly some mention of the Weedon Barracks as a separate development area or whatever you want to call it, because I think that is an important issue that needs addressing, like we've done with Overstone Hall.
Perhaps there is an opportunity to pick that up somewhere actually specifically, but let's go to Councillor Brand then.
Specifically on the issue of Weedon Barracks, which is just down the way from me. It is something that Weedon Parish Council are looking very closely at. They always have the site owner. Yeah, it's a particular interest of Kevin Perry, formerly of
Yes, that's where he got me interested in it. But the parish council were an obstacle to any development.
Yeah, he's very much taken on that mantle within Weedon Parish Council, and there does seem to be a desire.
Oh right, excellent. I didn't know about that.
That's good.
Yes, that's excellent.
Constructively, and for the first time in a long time, actually, the owners of the barracks are providing better communication with the village. Hopefully, with a view to actually regenerating that site. Yeah, you and me both.
And it should actually take a lot of the vacant property. It's 30, I think, isn't there? That's a relatively high percentage in sort of one go. You could get rid of, that generates money.
Yeah, I mean, I actually bought a house on Cavalry Fields 15 years ago, and of course, the big promise from Gladedale Homes, the development was we're going to develop the barracks. Of course, here we are still. Councillor Paul, actually, continue.
If I can start with Weedon Barracks, a couple of things in the way. It's a matter both dear to Councillor Frenchman's heart and my heart. I think it was 6 years ago when your previous, or the previous incumbent in Weedon was a member of this council. I did not like the negative press that was going about regarding Weedon Barracks and blaming Daventry District Council for everything that's happened to it. So I decided to call a meeting with the then owner, parish council, directors from here. Much to the surprise of the then owner, my opening question was, "Are you solvent?" Which shook him to the floor, and then stuttered and spluttered and said, "We're doing an amount of restructuring," which to me means that they were closer to insolvency than enough. To that meeting, I brought photos of Gun Wharf, Free Trade Wharf, in the East End of London, various other dockside buildings that had been converted into upmarket apartments. They retained exterior in total from the docks that they were, where you have a crane outside and you lift the stuff up and it goes in at the 6th floor. Locally they were called loopholes. They retained all the loopholes externally with the platforms, etc., etc. I suggested to the then owners this would be a beautiful thing to do in Weedon, but I'm sorry to say in front of Adam, Weedon Parish Council have never been very forward in coming forward with relation to any plans.
Okay.
However,
Can I just actually, because I think he's dealt with that one already, I don't want to get too sucked down.
It was suggested also to bring in retail into Weedon Barracks. Councillor Pritchard has mentioned the 2008 downturn and how the district suffered. I would rephrase that and say how the country suffered in that economic downturn. However, during that downturn, we've remained very positive. The positivity has reacted in the fact of, the low unemployment rates, etc. But during that time, we made plans about the recovery, and places like High Force benefited from Daventry District Council helping them forward, and in turn they are now adding to our revenue. Danelaw, another one where we assisted them. They were in dire trouble.
There are some very good case studies, Councillor Paulson. I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the recommendation.
Incentive to fill is another one. Now, within this, looking at all these properties, with regards to DDC, there is what's known as a property turn. So whilst a premise may be empty today, tomorrow it may be somebody in. So Councillor Pritchard has put a date on empty properties, which is...
Councillor Paul, can I just stop you? Do you have anything here that will be very relevant and material to the recommendations?
Well, rebranding, we've done that. Create external database, I've got no comments to make at that at the moment. Establishing a regular liaison with owners, managers, empty commercial properties. There is a lot of commercial sensitivity, as you would understand.
Actually, I'll tell you what, I want to take back control here. Let's do this in a different way. No, just stop a minute. Because what I'd like to do is take them in logical order. So what we're going to do is we're going to tick each one off.
Right. Okay.
And that way I've dealt with them, okay? So, right, thank you for your input on number one. Does anybody have any comments on number two? Can we adopt that one? Everybody happy to adopt it? I'm looking around the
So number one.
Number one, we'll do in turn.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we can get... Great. Thank you. So we all agree on number one. Great. Let's go for number two. First of all, let me ask committee members first, Councillor Paul, and we'll come to you as well. I do value your input, obviously, particularly because of you.
I think there should be dialogue, whether it's quite as formal as that, but we need to understand from a private landlord why his property is empty, because there may be things that we can help with, so there may be an incentive in business rates or whatever, that it's worthwhile for the marginal increase to get it full and get 3 more people, into jobs.
And the point about having a dialogue basically gives you the opportunity to explore the barriers, etc., and opportunities, etc. Okay. Obviously, you put it down, Councillor Pritchard, so working on the assumption that you support the recommendation. Although there might be some more tweaking on one of them, Councillor Frenchman and Councillor Brown.
Fully supportive. I mean, I think particular focus should be given to those property owners who have multiple empty properties.
So if you can just say, there's one other point I just wanted to make, is that with the icon, for instance, I don't think there's much mileage or need to do anything particular there, because it is what I would consider probably a high churn environment anyway, and it's somewhere for people to go short term and long term while they either go out of business or they establish themselves. So you need that bit of flexibility. It's the others that and taking Whedon out of it, it's the other sort of 220 that we should be looking at.
Actually, it's got a long tail there by the look of the data anyway. So maybe we don't need to focus on the higher priority areas, because basically you might take a different approach, or maybe we leave that to the management to decide on what basis that could be. I
take that point totally, in terms of that flexibility of the icon space. I just think, and I did ask Simon for the methodology, the town centre vision, and looking forward, and perhaps Councillor Paul might provide some information. What we don't want to do is make similar properties available on the same sort of strategy, knowing that we've had problems and these have been
talked about an icon too,
vacated for an awful amount of time, on the back of the fact that e-commerce is what it is. We've got Amazon who's invested here, thank goodness, but in terms of town centres as they used to be, they no longer will be that way.
Well,
it's essentially a change in character.
I agree with one. I'll come back on that one.
Well, I've already dealt with one once, so I'm not going to go back and discuss that, so thank you for your agreement. Number two?
Two, very difficult to get members. There are, I have to be careful with words, there are some property agents that see an empty premise as beneficial to themselves as an agent as opposed to the owner. You can read into that whatever you like.
I don't really understand your point, but I think the point here is that...
I'll tell you out of the confines of this room, but there are two properties in particular in Daventry where they have been empty for a number of years. I think we know which ones we're talking about.
Yeah, Councillor, I don't like talking in riddles at my committee, actually. I just, let's talk factually as possible and let's not be cloak and daggers about it. Basically, if there is commercial properties and we can do legal... Yes, please, thank you.
Right, we have a hotel in Daventry that's been empty for a number of years. Yeah? The same owner owns property in New Street in Daventry, which has been empty for a considerable amount of time. Are we suggesting that DDC could do anything about it? I honestly don't think so. I would need, the professional guidance. DDC are, as Councillor Pritchard already said, has done very well. We have been the enablers in given property. I like the idea of the database, but there is an amount of commercial sensitivity. I mean, you meant just briefly while I was thinking of the icon. I have to declare an interest because my daughter is responsible for letting the various offices within. And it's like playing solitaire. They want a three-person office, and that three-person office moves into a four-person office that vacates the three-person office and the two-person.
Yeah, because they're sharing the estate. Let's
go on to the town centre.
Yeah, Councillor Paul, I'm only asking for your feedback here because obviously we're the committee that will take the decision rather than the recommendation.
My feedback was what Councillor Pritchard said with regard to the town centre and niche market. It has been accepted because of e-commerce, of not only Amazon but Hellman Worldwide Logistics came here because of e-commerce prior to Amazon. But the niche market is where we need to go for the high street. I've already said this evening that our void rate in the high street is exceptional when it's compared nationally. But again, Councillor Pritchard is again right with a selling cube. And if you're a retailer and you want to, for instance, a new look or whatever, you have to understand these to go into the report. New look want, for instance, 30 feet by 30 feet by 30 feet by 30 feet by 8'6" high. None of the properties in the high street fit that dimension. We have to change our planning rules, so therefore it can't do it. They know what is going on.
Okay, so that's Councillor Paul.
We turn it to niche market and we get anchor in, then the niche market works.
Okay, good. Thank you, Councillor Paul. Let's move on with these now. So let's take number two. Let's wrap it up. Consideration be given to establishing regular liaison with owners and managers owned commercial properties, focusing on those character. Does the committee agree? Number two. Let's go forward with this one.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. Third one. It says here, Councillor Pritchard, explore potential for conversion of suitable vacant commercial properties to residential or other appropriate uses with the account orders. Can I simply add the words there that DDC should explore potential?
DDC?
No.
Well, I don't think we should be involved in that at all.
You don't
It's up to the owners to decide what they want to do with their property.
Do you fundamentally disagree with the third recommendation?
Yes.
Right, okay, let's have a debate on that one then. So going back to the point, Councillor Wilson made a very good point. So basically, if you've got vacant units that are not suitable, or basically over a period of time they're not deemed suitable for any use, do we not have a duty to see if we can have those as domestic dwellings?
I mean, we have done that. The job centre's just got commission of an HMO, hasn't it?
Exactly.
But I don't think it should be our duty to lead that conversation. It should be that information should be in the public domain for owners to make their own mind up. And you think if it was worth their while, they would. But you also don't want to dilute the high street or wherever by turning a perfectly good shop that may have potential into a house, because it actually brings a bigger short-term gain to the owner rather than the benefit of the district and the high street.
But if the nature of the landscape is changing, then therefore maybe there may be too much of the wrong kind of.
Well, I don't think I don't disagree. I don't think we're there yet. So I think to make this recommendation at this point is perhaps a bit premature.
Okay. Well, I'll come back to, no, wait a minute. I'll come back to you in a second, Councillor Brown.
The recommendation says that we should explore the potential for the conversion. How would that exploration look? What process would we go through?
That is, most of this is about communication with people that may be disenfranchised, maybe historically have hotels and there may be liaison and conversations, but on what regular basis and what offering of new incentives, because we either do nothing and it stays the same, all the numbers increase as they have already since I've written this report buying 4 properties, or we make efforts, at least, or seem to make efforts of this regular liaison. I totally agree with you. I'm not for making houses in the high street, that would not, and that wouldn't be appropriate or allowed, but accommodation above shops and back offices, there is potential for that.
Oh yeah.
Well, the hotel's a really good point, actually, isn't it? So the hotel that Councillor Paul referred to on the way to Daventry, well, could that be houses, apartments or something?
No.
Why not?
Allegedly, it has problems with it.
Okay, so but there's good examples. There may or may not be some houses we can demolish it and do something else. If I'm more creative in the land.
If I come back to the residential above the shop, where the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker used to live above the shop, what Councillor Pritchard has said with regard to niche market, in 2008 the country was in the clag. We are not there at this moment in time. We have very low unemployment in Daventry, thank God. However, once the cinema is in the high street, when you draw into the high street, you need an anchor in the high street to increase footfall. When you increase footfall, you increase a niche market. When you increase a niche market, invariably the manager or the owner of those niche shops lives over the top. Yeah. Now, at the moment, it's full of hairdressers, estate agents, and charity shops. That will change with a decent anchor, the anchor being a cinema, and you're turning a high street from retail into leisure.
What do you mean, so like loads of coffee shops?
Oh, coffee shop, nighttime environment, that was the big word, wasn't it? You know, so, you know, you're bringing people into a centre for a reason other than retail.
Right, let's go back to Councillor. You had your hand up to speak on a topic. Have you already covered that off now? Okay, good. Let's come back to the point, actually, because I'm really keen to work through this list.
And you say that 3 is actually covered by 2 in broader sense.
Sure, it is in a broader sense, but actually, if you read it again, it says explore potential. That's the point. It's not saying we will, but it's saying suitable vacant commercial, residential, or other. It's only an exploration.
It's the residential bit I'm not happy with.
But I don't. What is wrong with having a conversation about?
Because you put the idea in their head, and then for something they may have been looking for a commercial solution, and then we say, well, why don't you build a house there? Oh yeah, I'll do that.
Not necessarily building a house, but basically
converting to a house, but we don't want them to, because actually we prefer it to stay as a commercial property.
I think the recommendation's loose enough for when you're looking at that to actually then consider the various options.
I'll abstain on that point.
Wait a minute, Tony.
Chair, perhaps if you just lose the word residential from the recommendation.
So basically, you'd have a conversation with them, say, look, let's explore other options.
Yeah,
for this particular
that's
business.
fine. Yeah, I think he's actually specifically saying residential,
Okay.
where there could be other options that are equally or better for us, but not as good for the landlord.
Yeah, I guess the point here is it needs to be ultimately good for all parties. That's because we're not about just about land, it's also about providing homes.
I think, Chairman, that if you lose two residential, so you're saying potential for conversion to suitable vacant commercial properties or other appropriate uses, so you're not encouraging necessarily residential, but you're not excluding that from being an appropriate use or an appropriate use.
So actually, if we take it from the top, it'd be that DDC should explore potential for conversion of suitable vacant commercial properties to other appropriate uses with the account holders and agents.
Yeah.
Would you be happy with that?
That's fantastic.
Councillor Pritchard, great, okay, thank you. So, have you got that?
So, just to clarify, we're adding in that
DDC should
explore.
We shall actually, but we'll go with should. Should explore, and then remove the words residential or. So it simply reads properties to other appropriate. Happy with that one, good. Right, so we haven't had a set of recommendations through for a while, so let's see how we get on with the fourth one. And the fourth one is consider if there's a high vacancy retail area, and if so, consider rebranding and launch of an independent retail area with agreed associated budget. Let's take the comments on the committee first.
Completely.
You're not on the committee. Well, let's have the committee first. Do you know? It's like planning. Before you go to the committee first.
I think it's a fantastic recommendation. My only query would be where the associated budget would come from.
We don't need to worry about that.
Fine, but then I agree with it entirely. I mean, we've seen in Northampton the launch of the cultural quarter.
Yes.
I believe
There's all sorts of quarters. There's more than 4, I think.
I think, I was in the cultural quarter last week. It was, I was with Cecile, and there were drunks walking past us trying to grab.
They're in the drinking court.
They're in the drinking court. I shouldn't laugh really because it affects the one the next generation.
Can you keep not the attention of British
drinking culture.
Yeah.
We hear so much of that.
I fully support it.
Yeah, good.
I think exploring the potential for a certain identity to a specific area has great potential. So.
Good, thank you. Very, very sensible comments. Councillor Pritchard, and again, Councillor Frenchman. Let's take a final comment from Councillor Paul, and then we'll have the whole block done.
Number 4 should be taken out completely. Purely and simply because I don't want Henry Booth to slow down any more than they're slow at the moment.
Why will it slow them down?
Sorry?
Why will it slow them
Well,
down?
it slowed down from 2008 because...
No, but why will this specific recommendation slow
Purely
them
and
down?
simply because what we want in Daventry is retail. We are going to get retail. We are going to get the Site 5, yet to be named, retail coming to Daventry. We are trying to promote Site 1 by bringing in an anchor client, i.e. the cinema with associated business in and around and increased footfall into a high street. Yeah, and the reason for not turning Weedham Barracks historically into a retail or a village, outlet village, was purely and simply because of the damage it could do to the commercial properties that are going forward in Daventry at this moment in time. So whilst competition is a good thing, I don't think that that should be there to consider, another developer coming in and saying, "Oh right, we'll do this, we'll do that," and then all of a sudden,
I think you've misunderstood what we're talking about there.
well, you're
introducing
a rebranding launch for an independent retail area.
No. Only where there's vacant properties currently.
A rebrand, independent look. Where are the vacant properties?
Right, let's
It's as
stop a
if-
second.
I've already
There is
said.
a high vacancy.
It says
What? Sorry?
So the first line, consider if there was a high vacancy retail area, and if so,
Where we don't have high vacancy retail.
So that's fine.
then we don't need to act on the recommendation.
Well, that's what I said. You could take it out.
Councillor Pye has a point. If there's no point in the recommendation if we don't have a high vacancy area, you're saying if we do. But actually, a high vacancy retail area could be basically repurposed.
Yes.
That's the point of the recommendation. Councillor Boyd said is we don't have such an area in the town. But of course, well, we're really focused on the town, to be honest. Now, when people talk about when we talk about, but having said that, actually, Councillor, if Henry Boot come along and have a development, that may change the nature of the high street. It may create a high vacancy area in actual fact. So this recommendation may be in those circumstances.
Historically, and if you use other towns as an example, and even Milton Keynes Centre is, a classic example with anchor stores. And if you've gone to Milton Keynes Central of late, when it was first opened, you couldn't get a food outlet in there. There weren't any restaurants. All of a sudden, the anchor companies have made it possible for these food outlets to be able to pay the rents and rates, etc., and to be where they are. And that is not, Rugby High Street is dead, for want of a better word, because the anchor companies have moved out to Elliott Fields. Everybody's saying, oh, is it wonderful, Elliott Fields?
Well, actually, I recall reading last week in Rugby Advertiser that some people in Rugby, I think it was the Town Centre Partnership person, actually said we should have this as an independent kind of branded area. And I think maybe one of the areas you might think of... Wait a minute. One of the areas you might think of, Councillor Pritchard, might be... If you look at Sheaf Street, for instance, and the endeavours of Peter Harper, etc., making that and obviously Sheaf Street Health Store, etc., now gives it a bit of a more interesting flow. Is that what actually might help us go back to where you came from in the report? Tell us what drove this particular recommendation.
Because look, the thing that attracts is the different, the niched, the independent, the record shops, the vintage things, the quarters that you set up, Fargo Village, it's in Coventry, in Northampton, and by having not uniformity but some kind of theme, then there's an area where there are high void, high vacancy rate, and that's.
Can I say that we are actually handing on a plate to Henry Boot a fantastic marketing opportunity for them to brand their own quarter. If they're building the town centre cinema and whatever round it, why isn't that their quarter that they're promoting?
Well, it is called Mulberry Place.
Thank you. So they've got their own. What we're doing is we're suggesting.
But what Councillor Pritchard has just said, and what the chairman has just said, makes absolute sense. When if you take, for instance, the lanes in Brighton, Peter Harper started something. Peter and I passed 40 years ago when he was a buyer for millets, and the community that was built up in and around Sheaf Street was absolutely wonderful. Okay, so now we need to turn 45 degrees and go along the high street with that same sense of community.
Well, that's what Councillor Pritchard's recommendation is.
Yeah, exactly, and it will be achieved because Mulberry Place will bring the people in. It won't be achieved as an independent with nothing there.
I think we're probably on the same lines this one, so I'm going to take that as basically the end of the conversation. We've got 4 recommendations. We've agreed on those as a committee. They'll basically now go off to strategy group via the SMT. Okay, thank you. Good. So we put that one. We finished that one. Thank you for your input, everybody, on that one. Let's move on to the next agenda item. I knew that would be an interesting debate this evening. The next one is to understand how, well, this you've got some time off here for behaviour. So the next one, item B, will defer till the February meeting. On account of the fact Councillor Robertson can't make it, unfortunately.
Chairman, may I ask if we have any views about his wife?
She's just convalescing.
She's convalescent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't really want to be a kind of messenger or telegraph for that purpose, but yeah, thank you for the comment. The next one, therefore, is D. DEC and parishes, cooperation and the major plan applications. Councillor Frenchman, it's your turn to give a verbal update.
You'll be pleased to know this will be short. I've got together with 3 other councillors, of which we have another one here. We have one here, and we have put forward some questions and suggestions and doing a survey of parish councils as we speak. There's a slight delay because, of course, they have meetings at odd times, but we've given them until the end of November to get all the answers back to us. We've then agreed that we're going to interview the portfolio holders and officers in December, and that will give us the opportunity to get a report written over the Christmas holidays.
Perfect.
Or early January, so they can come to Wendy to go to wherever it needs to go, because I get confused, but anyway, it will be. I've looked at your timetable, hopefully it should fit in with that. So I would expect to be able to get a report, a finished report to you, or to the meeting in February, isn't it? I'll get a report to you in January for you to get to SMT, etc.
Good. Anything else to add? Or
No,
is that it?
that's it.
Good. Any comments on that? That's pretty. Councillor Pritchard.
Just that Walton Parish Council, thank your communication you sent, and really, have you heard from them?
No, I haven't, because I think you're Mark's dealing with it.
Yeah, I've actually done one with the town council, because that was easy.
Yeah.
I've had some communication with them, but it's a bit fraught over the last week, so sometimes I'm a little bit, probably about a week behind them, but yeah, I've sent down to them.
Chairman, please excuse me. I'm meeting with Councillor Brown tomorrow to talk about sports. So,
Very good. Okay. Thank Councillor Ford for your time. Righto, jolly good.
Yes, we put out, we got about 15 councils responded to our questionnaire, not our questionnaire, our request if they wanted to be involved.
Oh, good.
And so we divided them amongst, there's like 5, we're all doing 4 or 5 each.
I'm doing 8 actually.
Yeah, well, that's just because of he's our only one over this side, so thank you very much.
Or trying to do 8, and yeah.
That sounds quite a tough job, actually.
It isn't. It's not. Don't believe it.
No, I think it's all doable. I mean, at the end of the day, you can do it by if
I've done some by email because I know them well enough.
And are you happy with that response level?
Yes, I think so.
Because you don't have to go on.
Well, because a lot of the parishes aren't bothered because they're not affected by the larger applications. So in deep rural areas, everyone who is has really responded.
I bet they are. Yeah, I'll certainly be interested in seeing this one. I think it'll be interesting. Right, thank you very much for that. So the next one is B. Can DDC, this is a scoping document actually, can DDC take a more coherent proactive approach to ensuring the street scene? This is actually me. Now, I don't tend to like doing these too often. Not least because it makes chairing it later on a bit tricky, not for any other reason. But on page 35 and 54 you can see the scoping document for this, and in a nutshell I think it's basically, as we discussed in the last one we raised it, it's some parts of the area look a bit scruffy. Could we do more about it? Is enough being done? We know some of it's down to contractors and the relationship mainly, but that's not in scope. We understand where we are with that, but is there more? Is there a focus? And we also said, because if you remember last time, it also played into the brand of Daventry, which Councillor Wayne Howard manages and looks after for us, and essentially I'm asking for your support to enable me to go ahead with that project. Any comments?
The only one I had was the new sort of, in the not included, obviously you talk about the environmental services contract.
Yeah.
and I didn't quite know whether you were driving at this, but this should be used as a driver for the new contract.
I think it should be, absolutely.
Yeah. I didn't know whether you made that plain enough.
Good point. So if I basically say that it's to help, I mean, we had a really good example of that this evening, didn't we, the environmental management aspect, so to help shape the new one. But I didn't want to go down the black hole of the current contract.
No, I think you quite, yes,
it's too much, get nowhere. To help shape the new contract. And also, I think one of my key thinking was about single points of accountability. You know, when you have an issue, who's the go-to person? Some of it's played out with the empty commercial properties. One of the issues I've been pursuing is up on the high street, you know, iron grids left in the ground, and Steve Watton came back and said there's very little budget to fix some of these problems. So I want to draw a bit more into detail on some of this and take a bit more of a root and branch. Not least because, you know, when you've been out campaigning sometimes the most fundamental issue coming back from residents is if it looked a bit tidier, I'd be a lot happier. It can be quite straightforward. The other issue, which also cuts across particularly in this part of the district, is about the involvement of the parish council, which of course doesn't have the same level of activity or involvement as in other parishes as well. So there'll be a conversation with the town council as well I'd like to pursue.
But I was going to then add, on your witnesses, you've not mentioned parish councils at all there.
No, well, I think that probably will come into account, and actually I'm quite keen to speak to a couple of parish councils, actually, particularly those that take a very active approach to the street scene management. And again, I'll be very open to approaches on that one. I think for me, I mean, a lot of this, I think probably because we spend so much time in the town and because it is such a big area, I think that's one of the areas where it does attract some concerns and some criticism. So that will be a focus, but I think we can learn from benchmarking against parishes. Thank you for your point, Councillor Frenchman. Councillor Howard, Wayne Howard.
Yeah, it does go through a number of different agencies, not just Daventry Council, but you mentioned the parish, but also the street scene is actually down to the county, a lot of it. One of the things that was brought to my attention recently, because of the cycle ride we had, Alan Hills in his county council role we got some monies to paint some of the ballards around street lights and stuff, which again it's not a DDC brief, it should be a county or highways. But people have been saying to me that it's actually the wrong colour, because it needs to be bright, and 10%, this came from some guys I was talking to, 10% of the men are colourblind in the UK, and because of that you can't see the colour red, and you can't see the colour red and bricks and paths or roads or Northamptonshire stone, believe it or not. So the colour is a bit of an issue, so maybe that's something we need to look at as well. It's not probably just rebranding, but it's about thinking about, if you want to look at a ballard is there for protection, maybe it needs to be a different colour, a blue or green, and I'm being political here, but the red just doesn't seem right in a high street.
In so many ways.
And so many seats.
Well, you know what, it's been usual on this committee.
Absolutely.
So, but I think the science of it is the important part, isn't it, really? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that we need to be aware of, because actually you don't notice these posts anywhere. In Lang Farm, for instance, what we have in Lang Farm, on every road junction, you've got yellow ballards, which you don't even notice they're there. But until you walk, you psychologically don't realise. When you go to a crossing, they're actually black. And they're all over the place in Lang Farm, and it really works because nobody really notices, but everybody stands by them when they go across the road. So it's a psychological thing.
That's interesting. There's probably some interesting reports and studies on this. Councillor Pritchard, thank you.
No, just to comment on the substance of it. It was interesting. The other colour is green, and red or green are the two colourblind.
Yeah.
The predominant colours, they don't make it.
Blues and greens, red and browns are the issues there.
Is that organisation Rossborough, isn't it? Wouldn't they have something to understand this topic? Yeah, that's interesting. So there you go. I mean, fundamental stuff, isn't it? Like why is opposed to a particular colour, etc. Kind of.
But there is also, Chair, there is also cross agencies with it's not just the parish, it is the county with highways that we need to take into consideration.
I think that's our biggest problem, isn't it? There are. And I guess it might be flogging a dead horse in this one, but the public doesn't really care about that, do they?
And I wouldn't.
They don't know. They just go around thinking it looks a mess in places.
In Scrutiny, the parish council aren't responsible, as in all the villages, generally for the verges. But if highways don't look after them properly, the parish council get blamed.
Yeah, exactly. That's the conundrum. Councillor Wesley.
As you know, Chair, I thought this was a really good idea for you to look at.
In fact, you were on my task list, aren't you? I think.
I do think it's difficult. One of the difficulties is the multi-agency things. You know, it's like just around Daventry, you know, which bits of path, which there's parts of the roundabout are county, and the other parts are the district. And yes, various things are done. Obviously, it's like the roads. It's like very nice block paved ramps throughout the road that get filled in with big lumps of tarmac when the block paving falls out. It looks like a right tip, and that just all. And it's incremental that all of the things happen to it. And I think it's. I think the scope of this task is really to try and get everyone together. And I also think, portfolio holders as well. It just cuts across so many things. I mean, as a member here, sometimes it's quite difficult to grab hold of even officers. Everything seems to cut across everybody in the Daventry District Council, and you need to speak to 10 people to sort of join up the thinking on one part of a problem. And sometimes it just seems, oh my God, someone's complaining about that.
Where do I start?
Am I going to speak to about that? And maybe the size of the council and the number of people that we've got, but sometimes there is a focus, and it's like, it is. I do think we've said this before. If we're branding Daventry, it's got to be branded, and that's got to cut through the whole thing. It's no good just saying it. We've got to do it. And I sometimes think there's a gentleman sitting here that maybe should be the king of what looks good in this town. And I hope that's what sort of comes out.
The king of Daventry districts. But maybe that's the recommendation. Actually, I am going to ask for one concession on this, and I was thinking about it. I was perhaps a bit ambitious anyway, and given some of the feedback here, I think I'm going to ask to have this come back in April, not February. Otherwise, I might fall foul of my own timetable. So, can we change that, Wendy, to April?
What a cheat! Come on, Howard's going to his head.
Everybody else gets a couple of interim period. I wanted to get it finished, you see, but you've expanded my scope this evening. Okay, good. So I'll report back of an interim in February. So that's that one. Happy with me proceeding on that basis? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Wesley, much appreciate your input as always.
Thank you. Thank you. Cheers, guys.
Right. Next one is F. Can DDC do more to support the case of homelessness in the district? And Councillor Pritchard is going to kick off with a new project on this one, we hope. So, one note in this. The pages are transposed, so in actual fact they're back to front. So page 37 is later in the document 38. Just turn it around the other way and you'll see where the document begins. And Councillor Pritchard, can you talk us through this, please?
Yes, I mean, a significant support from Councillor Morgan within this scoping document. But the task aims to understand the current structure of support for homeless people to see if it is robust enough within the powers and parameters that DDC operate in to support cases of homelessness to a housed solution. This is complex, this is current. The impact upon the district is to be determined, and it's fortuitous that actually our annual figures will be going in from parishes being canvassed in terms of any rough sleepers currently, and then we as a council produce those annual figures, so that's very timely. The objective is to understand the processes, procedures when homeless people perhaps start interacting with agencies and the council itself. The reason why it is often complex is because comorbidities such as alcohol or drug dependency and significant mental health problems and other associated physical health problems as well as the social component. Considers any gaps in our approach, to review current data and records, to review what constraints there are to DCC doing more to support homelessness, to seek and propose a more coherent approach that makes a positive improvement to the cases of homeless in the district, and to learn from other councils to see how they approach the issue and what results they have. For this we can also leverage the East Midlands Scrutiny Network. The way that's going to be carried out is interview with key stakeholders, some data analysis, look at some policy, or lots of policy, and also speak to other community organisations that are currently supporting individuals within our district. That may be from agencies, or that may be volunteer organisations, that may be institutions such as the church. I think from this, there is going to be an interview with Maria. I asked for her help on this in terms of her processes, what makes someone active or not active on a housing register, for example, precedents, how long perhaps someone remains in perpetuity in not being able to access a register for whatever has gone on in their past life. I think important questions to ask, actually. I'll be interested in Maria's responses as well. And I think there's other issues that may come out of this in terms of us as elected members, our advocacy role, and how far we can advocate for them when perhaps the council may find some difficulty in terms of crossing boundaries in terms of the advocacy role. I mean, perhaps one of the tenets of our membership from the electorate is to support vulnerable people, definitely. So I will explore that as well within this scoping document. Is there anything else you wish?
No, I think that's. I think this. I mean, there are all these programs that we run through Scrutiny are grown up mature projects, obviously. But this one feels very timely for a number of reasons, not least because there's some activity in Parliament or in a bill on this topic at the minute. It's been under coverage in the last couple of weeks. I think it's probably recognised that there is a limitation currently to what local authorities can do. Yeah, I think I feel this particularly acutely as a councillor personally as well. When people approach you about a problem, you feel almost powerless. Oh, you should do one. I really like this point about elected members have a role to play in advocacy, etc. Let's open it to some comments. Councillor Frenchman.
Two things. I congratulate you on your well-written scoping document. Oh, right.
It's very good academic, yes.
Is it actually a problem in Daventry? I don't know how many roughly homeless people there are in Daventry.
That's such a good point to raise. I think the impact and scale of the problem cannot be denoted by the amount of people, even if it's one or two people. If we can't enable them to access housing and they're sleeping in sub-zero temperatures because of whatever policy or whatever stance or whatever history there is to their case, I think that's enough on its own. But I understand that. I'm going to gauge how many there are.
And the other point was, and I don't know the answer because I might just be making this up, is there any role that the NHS play in this, in terms of healthcare and provision and help for homeless people? Because you don't mention them, but they're not mentioned anywhere in the document. I don't know, but it's just a thought.
It's interesting, as advocates, as health professionals, yes, in terms of GP liaison services, in terms of community mental health, but none of that can help solve a housing problem when the housing stock is kept.
It's the actual house.
It's the house, not the reasons.
Well, the reasons may have led to them being homeless.
Yes, but I mean, the fact they've got mental health issues is not the same as that may have led to the homeless issue. Isn't the issue.
Well, if you make a decision as an organisation that you're not going to provide housing, or you're not going to make someone on an active register due to behaviours of previous tenancies, those behaviours are undoubtedly affected by those comorbidities, mental health, and etc. And you cannot separate them. You have to entertain them and have some understanding that that's where you are. Even though you have a responsibility for other tenants within housing around those, of course you do. But at the same time, you must entertain that there are health problems.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why I think it is so complicated, isn't it? Because they presented a set of situations. But ultimately, I guess, if the point is about homelessness, it's about providing a home. But actually, there could be a whole and of course, once they're on that journey, they get deeper into troubles as well, don't they?
It's harder, isn't it?
And so I think the concept of comorbidities is very important. And going back to the prevalence, I mean, when you drive around the district, I don't think you spot many of these cases. And I guess with a lot of the issues, we'll look at scale and numbers and volume to drive our thinking. But I think in a way, because I suppose in some respects we're quite fortunate because we don't seem to have too many cases, and therefore it almost suggests itself that we can get on top of the cases that we do have.
But I think homelessness can manifest in other ways, though. In our particular area, things like surface surfing for the youngsters who can't afford their own property.
Exactly.
That never comes to our attention because they're not sort of seen under the bridge, as it were. And you don't know. There could be hundreds of potentially homeless people, or
if they're
actual homeless people, but they've got a roof over their head because they just move around accommodating friends and relatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if it's necessarily within the remit of DDC or even this task panel, but I'd imagine that, having been in Northampton Town Centre a few times recently, there very obviously is a problem with homelessness there, and it may be that people, when they do become homeless, naturally gravitate towards larger urban centres because of increased footfall to be able to or whatever else. But so that may influence the lack of visibility in our area, but it doesn't mean that DDC can't play a part in solving that problem. So.
Well, I was quite struck by a conversation I had outside Waitrose in the summer where there were people saying they slept in the country park. And again, that's in some respects they are hiding away, but you don't see people in the country park. And again, it's a complicated situation. I had their caseworker contact me to see if there's any more we could do, and I gave them some signposting. But again, I felt there were limitations to what I knew what I could do as a counsellor as well. I think that's one thing.
One last point that popped into my head: would it be worth talking to the police? Sam Dobbs, the sergeant, etc. I mean, they must have some.
Sam Dobbs has been involved in.
Well, I know Sam quite well because he's one of my parish council leaders. But he or the police force generally must have some handle on itinerants, if I can put it that way, because they may not be homeless or they might be migrating through.
Given that I think we've all expressed a lack of knowledge or a lack of perceived ability to assist, would it be worth contacting Cecile Irving-Swift and Rosemary Daniels, is it? In terms of member development sessions, looking at the issue.
Could you take that up as part of the work, please, Councillor? That would be very useful.
Councillor Bowles has written one of the recommendations.
Yeah, I think you have actually. Yeah, that's very good.
Without wishing to
authorship,
that's a really good point actually.
Credits.
Just please pick up
Yep.
a couple of points. The sofa surfing, the not that traditional under the bridge, in the bush, in the doorway. It's been expanded. The latest capture of figures from Daventry District Council have then survey and then go back to central figures to try and capture some of those individuals, which is a good thing. As Councillor Brown suggested, they do converge on metropolitan areas or bigger areas for a variety of reasons. One of that is provision. And the other thing on the back of that, recently it was in the press in Nottinghamshire, Radcliffe Council were then starting to
Rushcliffe Council.
We're starting to then fine homeless people the sum of £60 to £100 or something.
I don't understand how that works.
So that is not something that we.
It's a good policy to look at, though, actually, in terms of understanding what's driving that and how. I mean,
it's movement of those people into those areas.
Yeah,
that's what happens.
I don't move them on. Yeah, Rushcliffe is interesting because it's generally quite a prosperous area.
I used to live in it.
Yeah, me too. I used to live in West Bridgwater.
So did I.
Yeah. In fact, yeah, exactly, just the road from us. But that's an interesting strategy, and that just moves the problem on.
Yes.
But there was also a feature last week about Nottingham City Council and about homeless people there going to one of the shelters in the town. And again, maybe they're pushed out of a place like West Bridgeford, where there are bridges to sleep in, of course.
It's a bit like the old Victorian or prior to that, the poor laws, isn't it? And the village having to look after their own because they weren't allowed to go to other villages.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point here, because we know that obviously a particular case we can't refer to specifically, but where actually the people having to manage the problem is the religious community in that particular case. Which also brings me to the point about Churches Forum is meeting next week, and we're hosting on this occasion on the 15th. It's actually specifically for the town wards actually concerned, but the topic is on homelessness next week. You're more than welcome to attend if you wish, but I will be updating that. Canon Michael Webber actually convenes and chairs that meeting. It's got a rotating basis. Sometimes it's at the town council, sometimes at the district council. And Councillor Warren will be speaking next week on this topic. And you're more than welcome. 15th of November here upstairs, chamber at 6 p.m. next week. Okay, it's not a decision-making forum, it's simply debating in the House. Right, very good. So are we happy to adopt Councillor Pritchard's scoping document and for it to be a committee? It's a series of, I mean, they're all serious, but it's got, feels like it has a real gravitas. Good, we look forward to your report. Thank you. Which will be, by the way, I think this says the final report being April. There's a lot of people I know are very keen to see progress on this issue. Good, thank you. So let's move on. The next one is the rolling work programme. Now, the rolling work programme we have on here, but actually I can tell you that we used to have it in the pack, but we decided to move on to here. Tony, I think in actual respect there's not that much to update on this meeting actually.
Do we want to put it on?
Does everybody want to have a quick look at the rolling work programme? Yeah, there's no new items to add apart from what's on it.
No, I'd appreciate just a quick glance.
You can have a look at it.
Could this be sent out electronically with the
Yeah, that's a good point actually. Where they were, because
I forgot what it's called, the
agenda.
KPI ones.
Yes, it should be, couldn't it actually? Because it's ready by then. Because it's the document that I put together.
Because then we can look at it beforehand and only really need to discuss it if there's things to add or we've
That's a
got
good
questions.
We've never found the ideal format for this. It's nice when it sits on your desktop as an Excel spreadsheet.
Yes.
But it's challenging.
So I can put it on my iPad, I can make it big enough to read it.
So basically, as you know, this tells us all the progress of the projects, and after tonight's meeting, this will be updated to reflect the fact that 4 recommendations come through from them to commercial properties, which closes that project down for us. And there's a couple of projects which Tony's going to update on in a minute, where we've previously had one of our recommendations go through the system, and we're now looking at post-implementation. And then there is the one which you've got at the end of the agenda tonight, which is post-implementation reviews, which is going to keep us busy. I don't think there's anything else particularly to add on that, Tony. Does anybody want to focus on a particular project and look at it at all?
No, I'm fine, Chair.
No. I think that really is just our guide, really. In a way, I mean, it sits there and it guides the agenda, and we keep a track on anything. So I think that's probably okay if anybody's got any further comments. By the way, we can always print that back out with the pack if anybody preferred to see it back in the pack.
I think as long as for me, if it's sent out with the KPI data, then that's fine.
You'd be happy with that?
I'm happy with that.
Okay, when you can make an hour?
May I point out an error on
Sure,
my own?
Please do, yeah. On your own?
I've been misnamed as Smith.
You're Smith on there, are you? Something to do with Wheaton and councillors and...
Yes, yeah, wrong.
Sorry. So I'll change that. Jacob Smith and Brown.
You always blame him when it goes wrong.
What's the chance of that? I mean, Smith and Brown, I can't believe I've got a mix of those two. Smith and Brown in Wheaton. Sorry. Okay, thank you. So I'll amend that accordingly, and Wendy will see to it that it's sent out electronically. Okay. Then RWP, Councillor Smith to Brown. Good, thank you. So sometimes we look at adding new issues. Now I've got one here actually I'd like to raise, and that is, you heard me mention earlier I was at the corporate governance session, which by the way I believe all councillors were invited to last week at Northampton Borough Council at KPMG did. I think all councillors were invited, but I sit on corporate governance, of course, as well.
I don't remember.
Maybe I think it's corporate governance, I'm not sure. Anyway, but one of the other councillors was there talking about Modern Slavery Act statements and whether local authorities had a requirement to produce this. Are you familiar with the Modern Slavery Act? Anybody here?
Only vaguely.
Right, okay. Well, basically in 2015, the government had, really in response to big concerns about modern slavery across the UK, and you have probably, particularly members who've been on this committee have probably referenced it before because you've done a spot dip in some projects before now. But actually one of the councillors last week queried whether there's a section called Section 54 which relates to disclosure of endeavours around when procuring services, around whether organisations have to produce a statement. For all commercial organisations with a turnover of 36 million, they're obliged to produce an annual statement discussing what they've done around this particular topic in order to comply. And I've had a number of conversations with people I know, both law firms, etc., about local authorities, and I did raise this last week with Simon Bowers. I don't know if has he communicated on this, Tony?
He's not spoken to me.
Not spoken to you about it. This feels to me like a corporate governance issue rather than a scrutiny issue. So maybe I'll pick that up separately. But have you got any thoughts on that, Tony? So I'm looking at whether we should produce a statement on a piece of legislation.
Yeah, I mean, it's perhaps for discussion outside of this meeting. If you can signpost me to what information you've got, and then we can look at that for consideration for corporate governance committee potentially.
Yeah, I think it probably needs to be looked at there. I'll follow up with that actually. Yeah. I think the issue is I've been given lots of different answers, and where I think it would be a concern for scrutiny is because we could look at the underlying systems which the report is based on, if such a report is required. But, so far I can't get, I'm doing Italian, it seems to be evens on whether we should or shouldn't. Okay. Good, let's move on. So we've got here, Tony, implementation activity. And you've got to update us on 7A and 7B. Can we have an update on those, please?
Yes, Chairman. We didn't include the update sheets and the agenda primarily to save a bit of paper because there is no significant update. But I'll just remind you where we are with these.
Please.
The rural economic roles and strategy assignment, there were 3 recommendations from that, and essentially they were allocated to the actions were allocated to the Council's Strategic Economic Development Officer, and some members I expect will be aware that we've been struggling to recruit an Economic Development Officer for some time, but we have now appointed, and there's an Economic Development Officer due to start later this month, so those tasks will be on her work list. So we should be able to report some progress next time.
Good. So a person has now been appointed.
Yes.
So we can leave that on there, and you can update at the next meeting if appropriate to give us a progress update. Anybody got any comments on that? It's pretty straightforward, simple feedback. And item B.
Item B, the customer satisfaction low response rate to surveys. There was a single recommendation from that a measure be reviewed and revised as part of the 2017 to 20 corporate plan, and that, as was mentioned earlier, that process has started, so that will be picked up as part of that work.
Good. Okay, thank you. Anybody any comments? No? Okay, thank you for that, Tony, much appreciated. Let's go on to now. This item 8 is something we didn't cover at the last one because we ran out of time. So I'm glad to see that we've got some time to discuss it this evening, but we'll make it quite quick. Now, again, to give you a quick recap on the history, some time back, Councillor Long, I think, recommended that we do post-implementation reviews at 1 year. And here they are. Basically, they've all come down the line. Actually, we're here waiting at the station last month. And what we need to do is do a 1 year review. Now, a 1 year review could be a very quick exercise, technically speaking. which is where we find the relevant stakeholder, portfolio holder, or officer, etc., both, and simply look at the evidence that is being implemented and the implementation has been sustained. Tony, you look like you want to say something.
No, Chairman.
I was more welcome to let you.
I'm agreeing with you, Chairman.
Okay, great, thank you.
There's a slight flaw, I think, in this, is if you look at the previous agenda item A, 7A, it's obviously a year or however long it's been, but because it's been delayed because there's not been
no, there's no flaw actually, if I've understood this correctly. It's basically after it's been implemented. These here, 7A and B, haven't been implemented, so we'll track it after it's been implemented.
So it's not when they've been agreed, it's when they've been. So how do we know when they've been implemented?
Well, we know they've been implemented because Tony reports back to us that they've been implemented.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. And actually, this is where the tracking comes in handy, because on the tracker it says when they were implemented, so we got notification.
I got it around my neck.
That's okay. No, we've it's a good question to ask actually, and unfortunately, or fortunately, depends where you look at. They have been implemented and then we've got a review.
Yeah, that's fine.
But you'll be glad to know once that review has been done, that's it. We don't have any further engagement with it unless it becomes a topic for future reference. So what I'm looking for is volunteers, and I think we should probably share the workload here. And we can obviously take at least one each anyway. So we just need really volunteers. So assignment 5, and the documents are there. So if you turn to page 41 to 42, you can see. So there it is. And because you've got a proper numbering system in assignment 5 is a unique reference point, and that's the project. Wendy, you wanted to say something about this particular thing?
What I've done for each of the assignments is complete a pack in addition to the front cover that you've got there, which, and I've done copies of the original report and the minutes that relate to the report, going through from S&I committee through to strategy and finally through to council, so you can actually follow a thread
Across the whole cycle.
Across the whole thing, so you'll get some indication as to what happened. So it might well help.
Great. So in the pack, in your main agenda pack, you've got a summary, a one-pager or two-pager, and Wendy can hand out the actual documents for takers. Tony.
Chairman, what's in the pack is actually a template for completing the review.
Oh, it is as well. Very good, thank you. Well noted. Well noted.
If I may, I mean, it sets out just as a summary what the recommendations are. So I think, I mean, obviously it's for you as the committee and individual members as to how much you do with this, but essentially we're looking for this template to be completed.
Absolutely, good point.
To show evidence of implementation and effectiveness of that.
Yeah, and then whether it's basically if it's stayed complete and implemented. And in a way, really, it's only those 3 columns for each of the recommendations. And to give you this first one, so for instance, if you look at this one, particularly Councillor Pritchard, so assignment 5 was a project that Councillor Randall led. And it was basically the recommendations that got followed through are all listed, and it's really simply a case of you would say, has that been implemented? Go and speak to the relevant person, and essentially, yes, there is evidence it's implemented, that's it. Now, already it should have been implemented because we've been told it's been implemented, that you want to see, and then you go into effectiveness, is it still operating in accordance with the original recommendations, etc. And then implemented just be a tick at the end or not. And if it's not, then when you report back to the committee through the normal cycle, you would simply give us this feedback on this template. So that's that. So that's how each one of those works. I don't go through much detail unless somebody else wants to. Can we have takers? It's a bit like an auction. Perfect. That'd be good actually, because I think Wendy would like to. You can obviously talk to Wendy about it, the originator. If you get stuck, Wendy or Tony can signpost. Okay. So this is. Yes, Pritchard take. By the way, these are meant to be quick exercises, so please report back for the next meeting, because then we'll just at the risk of saying mercenary, we'll just kill it. Okay, otherwise we'll just keep them that way. The next one is, I'm making out that Pritchard. I can see you're all very eagerly about to volunteer. Next one is assignment 6, review the quality of public engagement undertaken by the DDC. Now, interesting enough, that was Councillor Randall as well. Any takers? Councillor Brown, thank you. The next one is assignment 11, review of DDC procurement procedure.
I'll do that, but there don't seem to be any papers in here about it.
Assignment 11, let me have a look. We've got a pack here anyway.
Yeah.
There is, if you go to page 45, that's a good one.
It's a review of corporate strategic plan.
Page 45 of 54,
Yeah.
Councillor Frenchman, there's 2 recommendations.
It says review of corporate strategic plan performance. Is that?
No, this is the point you're making, sorry.
Yes. We had...
Good point, don't worry.
In the task panel review, I've altered in the first column, I've reworded that slightly.
Oh, right.
So it does reflect the title, Review of DDC Procurement Procedure for Engaging Third Parties in Service Delivery, e.g. the crematorium.
There was just a little error in the task panel column.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so
it's the wrong task panel. But
it's the wrong task panel, but what you see, review of
Thank you.
DDC, is the right one. Okay.
Is there a pack with it?
Yes.
Good, thank you, Councillor Frenchman. So it's nice actually, there's only 2 recommendations on that one to follow up. To verify. The next one is assignment 12. Unless somebody else wants it, I'm happy to take that one. Assignment 12. See there. Then we've just got one left. So assignment 13, complaints procedure and process review. Does anybody want this one? I'll give you 2. Whoever takes it has got 2 to do.
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Oh, that's very kind.
And you've got the recommendations on that one.
So on that one you've got, just note the... So let's get this right. So assignment 13, you have to take that one.
Yes.
Yeah, good. So that's on page 51, everybody. It's very kind of you, very admirable to take 2. Blood punishment, thank you. That's that concluded. So we'll seal those back in February. The next item on the agenda is to receive an update on the criteria. Now, in actual fact, we've already had this because it got folded in, and we also had the document, so we don't need to do any further work on that. Isn't it amazing, actually, at this point in the agenda, how much of the agenda we can get when we've got slightly less of us in the room?
Is that a slightly less one particular person?
But actually, that's me not being transparent. But interestingly enough, folks, we have got the opportunity, of course, in April to invite a portfolio order in. So, does anybody have any thoughts on who am I allowed to invite and a particular topic we might like to question on?
Would it be totally selfish to ask to invite Councillor Hills, as I'll be delivering my...
Councillor Hills, now that's an interesting one actually, because we've had Councillor Hills in before, and actually after Councillor Hills was in last time, we did kick off a bit of a piece of work. We did SLM, and we had some queries on that, and then about the utilisation of assets, and then we invited him in. So we could be, but in a way, your project will be finished by then, won't it?
Who haven't we had? I can't remember.
Well, we've never. Interesting enough, we've never actually had Councillor Pauling in a formal role to talk about economic strategy, etc. Good point. We've never had. Let me tell you who there is, and then think about the issues. So we've got Councillor Colin Paul. You know what he does. We've had Councillor Wayne Howard before, talk about communication. Did a very good presentation. Councillor John Shepherd is an interesting one because that that's not really an area of main scope for us. We've got Councillor Mike Warren. That might come into some of Councillor Pritchard's areas it's looking at, and then we've had Councillor Chris Miller, of course, Councillor David James on strategic planning, particular issues around neighbourhood planning, policy guidance. Then we've got Councillor Guildford, environment. Now we've had quite a bit of environment in the past, but because of the big contract, that might be premature.
She's coming to February.
And of course, she's coming to February, so we talk about green flag anyway. We warn. And then we've got Councillor Hills, which is community, as you were saying. So they're the people available to us.
Steve Osborne.
Yeah, and Steve Osborne for planning, but I don't think we've got any major planning issues other than the one that you were talking about as well. Yeah, there are certain areas where we don't.
I think
Colin Paul might be an interesting individual to have. And
could I make a very selfish suggestion that you actually give him a time slot?
Yeah. Well,
agreed. Is that funny, eh?
Well, interesting enough, Councillor Paul was invited to Churches Forum and he accepted the invite to talk about economic policy to churches, and then declined after the agenda had gone out to say he was on the agenda. So, but of course that has no power to ask him to come along, but it's interesting nonetheless. So should we resolve to invite him formally to the meeting, and we can actually resolve finally what he talks about in more detail at the February meeting if we wish to depend on circumstances visit the time. Happy with that?
Yes.
Good. Okay, so let's formally invite him. Actually, Wendy, could you do us a favour, please? Could you actually invite him formally to the April meeting tomorrow and say he's requested he attends, and we'll actually give him the agenda in due course, but obviously in relation to his portfolio. Happy with that? Good. Thank you. So the next item is to review training requirements for the next 12 months. I think we've identified that we've got obviously an evolving team, and we're very, very fortunate. I think we've got a very good team here now. Actually, we've obviously Councillor Frenchman's experience and the vigour and enthusiasm and the intellectual input that Councillor Brown and Pritchard bring. But there's obviously always potential for some extra training. And Wendy did have some updates on some extra training we could have. Bear in mind, it's not only for us, we can also open it up to everybody else. So we've got a particular one here which we were going to bring last time. Actually, we had to defer it as well, which is why do scrutiny? How do you do scrutiny effectively? Methods for scrutiny, so you talk about mixed methods earlier, that kind of thing, about research techniques, and don't forget we can open it up to everybody on the council as well, so they can see how we operate. We've used a couple of vendors in the past. Actually, we had a couple of sessions at Birmingham University, didn't we?
I thought that was very good.
Which was quite effective.
But I think it was all day, wasn't it? Which is...
Well, ironically, the last one we held, I couldn't attend it because I had a business commitment in some far-flung corner or other thing.
2 4-hour slots.
Oh, right.
John Cade came at 4 o'clock.
Oh, was it?
And left 8 o'clock.
Oh, it just seemed all day.
You probably felt like all day, yeah.
He was quite good.
He is quite good, actually, yeah.
But I think a general training session on what scrutiny,
what it is, back to basics almost, how you do it.
And I think that would work well with other councils, because one thing we don't get is we don't get many ideas from them.
Exactly.
For us to then take up, and really that's where they've got so much more spread.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have to think of everything.
No, I agree, absolutely. That was a bit of a concern by the beginning of the year, actually. We seem to have got through it pretty well, but it's not only about our minds, is it? So yeah, does that sound good? What about, could you also add that topics for scrutiny? Yeah.
So if Cecile could add it to member development.
Absolutely, yeah. So Wendy will go away and talk to the required people and get that scheduled, or at least request that schedule. But we're happy with those broad areas. Yeah.
Took the schedule and had an up-to-date for member development. There's a blank in February which might be a bit close to our own scrutiny committee. And then there's
March. 22nd of March.
or 19th of April were 2 to...
Either those 2 dates sound okay to people? I mean, to where anyway?
I just head so far ahead.
Yeah, they soon populate.
I have trouble with next week.
I guess your schedule populates quite in advance anyway, but we'll go for those 2 dates when I open up. So could you, either of those? Yeah, because also the person delivering will need to be available.
Yes.
So happy those broad topics.
Are you going to do it?
Am I going to do it?
Aren't you going to present it?
Well, no, I don't need to because I can get an expert to do that.
Oh, right, yeah.
I have done a few sessions in the past, as you'll remember, which we thought was quite useful. But I think we'll go back to a scrutineer who does these things for everybody. Did we speak? I tell you that other lady, did it quite? Steph, Dr. Steph. She's done some of those sessions, which have been quite helpful before. I can't remember her surname, but I'll just call her Dr. Steph.
Sounds like a television doesn't it?
She was the lady who did it without her shoes on. That's her specialism, without her shoes on. Remember? We had her in Mount Mowbray.
Oh, that lady?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. She might be a possibility. But anyway, Wendy will go away and can you just organise some Wendy along those topics and come back to us? That'd be much appreciated with the Rosemary and Cecile, thank you. And then we've got those two. So we've got some dates, we've got some topics, everybody's open to it, and we'll come back to that. Good. Right. Finally, Tony, you're going to update us on the Constitution in regard to public engagement. I think we might just get this one in full Richie now, is that correct?
Certainly I don't intend to speak for 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Without hesitation or stumbling.
The background to this, everybody, is that we had, if you recall at the last meeting, we actually had some public attendees, which is quite unusual. In fact, some of them I didn't even recognise. And the lady in particular, and I don't know who she was, but she was adamant that she wanted to talk to us. And also, we had a former councillor over who should know the rules better, who was actually attempting to talk to me. And he wasn't very happy about not being told not to. But it occurred to me that perhaps there is an opportunity, should the Constitution allow, to have people speak to us should they turn up in the first place on a matter of scrutiny. And that goes back to your idea, Councillor Frenchman, about being open to concepts. So Tony's going to see if we can or can't anyway, so that's the next bit. That'll be a very short answer.
It depends how you want to do it, really, I think is the answer. There isn't any provision in the Constitution for members of the public to turn up unannounced and be free to speak.
And that's in the entire council constitution, of course. There's no provision that permits them to do this.
That's right.
Yeah.
Where members of the public do speak, for example, planning committee, they will speak on a specific application, so they will be speaking either for or against an issue, but they need to book in ahead for that particular agenda item to do that. Council is the a place where members of the public can come and speak on or ask a question on any particular issue, any issue. But again, they need to do that in advance. They need to let us know and submit their question in writing in advance.
And do they know who to submit it to?
Yeah, it's within the committee papers and on the website. There's something there that says if you want to speak to council, this is how you go about it.
Procedure.
So there is the speaking at council is the only general provision to speak on anything. That said, there is provision with the Constitution to invite members of the public for scrutiny, but it needs to be on a particular issue. So if you identify an issue of interest or issue of concern, maybe a single task panel, and to advertise the fact that we're doing that and to invite people to come along, then they could be allowed to speak on that particular issue.
So advertise maybe in the Daventry Express on our website, for instance, formal advertising.
So members of the public would need to be invited to come in to speak.
Gotcha.
But on a particular subject.
On a particular topic. Can we go back an issue? Is there anything, because full council you can speak on any topic as long as you give advance notice.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a written question, isn't it?
Yes, a written question. You can ask a question, but the question needs to be submitted in writing first.
That's it. So the question's written in advance. Obviously, you can speak it if you wish.
Yes.
But actually, that doesn't. While it's available to full council, is there anything in the Constitution that says it can't be used anywhere else? In other words, is it restricted in the Constitution to full council?
It is only allowed at council. That's the way the Constitution deals with it.
Right, it's only allowed at full council for that particular procedure. So we could, basically, by definition, because of the Constitution, we couldn't do that here.
No. Not as the Constitution is written. And I think, given that it is a provision which is special to council, if you like to refer to it in that way, it would probably be seen to be something reserved for council. However, it's committee was minded to challenge that, then that's the committee.
Well, I guess you have to go back to the objective. Is there any reason for us to challenge it? But bearing in mind the amount of people we get here, it doesn't happen very often.
No, but if we started, for instance, I'm just guessing here, but if we did a scrutiny and improvement on the canal arm, we'd have to have it in the chamber, wouldn't we? Because people would want to come.
Yeah.
And if people then said, we want to talk, it's better to think about it now while we're not under pressure.
Yeah.
So when you are. Because it occurred to me that if somebody wrote to you, or wrote to the council and said, I want to talk to Scrutiny Improvement about something that I think is whatever it is. I'm going to say cemeteries, for instance, just as an example. If you weren't, you could then invite them to come.
Yeah.
So you could actually vet them, A, that they weren't malicious, and B, that they weren't vexatious or whatever.
So but you could do it. I understand the point. Yeah.
So you could invite them if they've got a valid reason for coming to talk.
I mean, within that basis, then we could actually put that on the agenda, couldn't we? That this is a particular topic, and we can talk on it. So we can schedule it anyway, and then invite them to speak. But Councillor Brown,
I have just noticed that several items, in fact, nearly all of the items on the agenda are asterisked, and it says item open to public participation. Please contact Wendy Craven by 12 noon on the day of the meeting if you wish to speak.
Tony, want to give us some advice on this one, please?
That's just been there, hasn't it, for as long as I can remember.
It's historical.
Yeah, so,
wow, how fast!
So it must be right, because you had to put it on in the first place if it wasn't.
I mean, yes, well spotted. I guess that could be perceived as being an invitation. So somebody would have to arrange to come in to speak by appointment through Wendy, who's the clerk for this particular meeting.
Gosh, how fascinating! Yeah.
But I think if you wanted to have members of the public participating in a particular subject, then it would be the thing to do would be to advertise that and say, this particular item on the agenda is on the agenda. If you wish to speak on this item, please come along.
Please come along.
So, Chair, one other thought which may be of some interest. What I've spoken about thus far is around the formal committee meeting, but in respect of task panel work, then there's no rules in the same way around task panels, because task panels aren't formal meetings as such.
Yeah.
So a chair of a task panel may wish to engage a focus group or have a public meeting to discuss the particular issues of their task.
I applied to Councillor Pritchard, for instance, on the panel that the asylum
Or the homeless one.
Exactly, the homeless one. Okay, so that makes sense, Tony. I wonder actually, now you've raised something we've all been blind to, Councillor Brown, they've always been for several years. Do we need to do anything about the item open, or can we simply just leave that there?
Chairman, I think that's something we'll have a look at outside the meeting. You may find the asterisks aren't there next time round. But
if that is true, I say if. Can I suggest that sentence is possibly put at the beginning of the agenda? Because more people will look at the start of an agenda than the end of an agenda.
Yeah, clearly we don't look at it.
Yeah. I actually read it this afternoon, but it just never occurred to me.
Councillor Pritchard.
Just being mindful of a couple of things. One is, of course, we don't know what agenda an individual might come in with in terms of trying to direct conversation, but equally, because it's a recorded meeting, as Councillor Paul was aware of, that you are perhaps facilitating a platform for slander, because it would be recorded and out in public domain. If they then say, and how will they be protected, or will they? It's completely up to them. And
it's the same with planning. There's no, I mean, I know they come to talk, but there is often neighbourly nastiness.
Okay.
But it doesn't come. We don't police what people say.
No.
They are told that it's their views, in effect, and that it's recorded. They are clearly told it's recorded.
Okay, so can I stop you 1 second? I just need permission to carry on the meeting just for a couple more minutes. Is that okay? So then you can carry on. Happy with that? Good. Okay, we'll carry on. Carry on, please.
No, that's fine. I mean, I'm obviously not aware of that. But if it's just not a disclaimer, some guidance, perhaps that they're offered, first of all, whatever you say to record it.
Yes, I think that's important.
When you say that, no, you don't.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, Councillor Paul was actually foolish for saying no, and obviously jumped in to correct him. I mean, I don't want any of that kind of cloak and daggers in this community anyway. I won't encourage or condone it. But I think, Tony, depending on this particular item, you'll have a look at that in terms of the wording, the tightness. And it may well be that actually there's been a breach of some corporate governance or something for years on. Maybe you want to look at the other agendas as well in the council to see the issue. I'm sure you will.
Well, I think, Chairman, I don't think there's been a breach because we haven't allowed people in to speak. So.
Sorry, yeah, a kind of technical breach in the documentation.
But certainly we'll have a look at that. And I think just in response to the earlier point, that yes, sensible to advise members of the public if they are here and wishing to speak. The meeting is being recorded, but also there's a role for the chairman to curtail any speaking that's going in.
I think our chairman is quite adept at that, especially.
Thank you very much.
Other members.
Thank you very much. It can be a challenge at times. So I think we've dealt with that issue actually, and in that case, if there's no other urgent business, we'll close the meeting there shortly after quarter past 9. Thank you very much, everybody. Oh, sorry, summary. We've had 4 recommendations go through. Thank you very much, Councillor Pritchard. 2 new scoping documents approved to come back through in April. 2 on the way to full for the next council, for the next scrutiny, February, and we've allocated the projects, the 1-year implementation. So, good piece of work this evening. Thank you very much, and thank you as always to Tony and Wendy. Right. Job done. Councillor Pritchard.